My
I
name
always
is
thought that
Annalise
turning
Rowe, and
35
the day
would
I
feel more
realized my family
significant.
truly didn't see me
That
was
somehow
my
the day
younger
would
brother
arrive
threw
with
his
a sense of
graduation party without
gravitas,
even thinking
of
to invite
undeniable
me.
adulthood.
Funny how the people you spend your entire life
Instead,
with can
I
make you
woke
feel
up
like
on my
you never
birthday
existed
to
at
an
all.
empty space beside
It
me
all
in our
started with a
king-sized
single
bed
text
and
message I read 3
the
days
faint
too
scent
late.
of my husband's
The text
cologne
came from my
lingering
cousin
on his
Marcy,
pillow.
asking if I'd made it
Daniel
home
had left
safely after the
early,
big bash.
which wasn't
My
unusual.
fingers hovered above my
As a
phone as I
financial
read it
advisor
over and
for
over,
high-net-worth
confusion
clients,
turning
his
to
schedule
disbelief,
often
then into
demanded
something
early
hot and
mornings
jagged
and
that
late
sat right in
nights.
my throat.
What was
I was 2 hours
unusual was
away,
the
holed up
absence
in
of a
my
birthday
tiny
card
flat
on
in
my
Sheffield,
nightstand,
pouring
or
my
a
heart
text
and soul
message
into
wishing
my
me
final
happy
architecture
birthday.
project, while
In
my
the 8
brother,
years we'd been
darling
married,
golden boy
Daniel had
Braden,
never
was
forgotten.
walking across the
He's
stage with my
probably
parents
planning
clapping from the
something,
front row.
I told
And
myself,
the party
padding
afterward?
into our
A
ensuite
sprawling
bathroom to
affair on the
start my
back
morning
lawn of my
routine.
parents' country house.
My
With
reflection
fairy
stared
lights
back at
strung through
me,
the oaks and
dirty
laughter
blonde
drifting
hair
through the
falling
windows like
just past
smoke.
my shoulders,
I
green
wasn't
eyes
there,
that Daniel once
because
said
no one told
reminded
me.
him of
Because
sea
nobody
glass,
thought I
a few
mattered
more
enough
fine
to
lines
send an
around my eyes
invitation.
than I
I
remembered
could
having
almost hear my
last
mother's
year.
voice,
I was
crisp
running
and
my
polite.
fingers through my hair when I
Darling,
noticed it.
we didn't
Daniel's
think you'd want
wedding
to
ring
interrupt
sitting
your
on the
precious
edge of the
design work.
sink.
They'd
He
say
never
it was
took
my
it
fault
off.
somehow.
Not
They
for
always did.
showers, not for
I wanted to
sleep,
scream.
not for
But
anything.
instead, I threw my
A
phone onto the
cold
bed,
sensation
paced the
spread
length of
through
my
my
shoebox
chest as I
flat,
picked it up.
and felt the walls
The
closing
platinum
around me.
band still
The hum of
warm
the
as if it
city
had only
was just
recently
outside the
been
window.
removed.
Traffic,
My phone
laughter,
buzzed from the
some
bedroom,
distant
and I
busker's
nearly
guitar.
dropped the ring.
But
In my
inside,
rush
it
to
was
grab
so
it,
quiet I could hear my
expecting
pulse
Daniel's
hammering
name
in
on the
my
screen,
ears. I thought about the times
instead,
I'd sat in
it
those
was my
same
best
rows for
friend,
Braden's football
Olivia.
matches, his science
Happy
fairs,
birthday,
his
Megan.
plays,
Ready for
the
lunch?
hours I'd spent
I'm
cheering
dying
for
to
him
give
while
you
he
your
basked in the
present.
glow of our
I
parents'
stared at my
unwavering
husband's ring as
adoration.
I responded.
He was the
Thanks,
sun.
Liv.
I was the
Can
dust
we
motes
push it to
drifting in
dinner?
his life.
Something's come
I
up.
opened my laptop.
Everything okay?
It glowed white
Not
in the
sure.
dark.
I'll fill you
My
in later.
architecture project
I tried
was nearly
Daniel's
done.
cell.
The
It rang
presentation
4
slides
times
waiting
before
for
going to
finishing
voicemail.
touches. I should have focused on that.
Hey, you've
My
reached
future,
Daniel
the one thing
Warren.
they
Leave
hadn't
a
yet
message.
touched with their disinterest.
Daniel,
But
it's me.
instead, I typed Braden's
I
name into social media.
found your ring.
Photo
Call
after
me
photo
back,
bloomed
please.
on my screen.
By
There he
noon,
was,
he still
arms
hadn't
draped around
responded,
our mother and
and the
father,
cold
all of
feeling in
them
my
grinning
chest
like
had
they'd won the lottery.
transformed
My
into a
father's
hard
hand
knot of
rested on
dread.
Braden's shoulder,
This
pride
wasn't like
radiating
him.
from every
Even
pore.
during our
The
worst
caption,
arguments,
"Couldn't
Daniel
be
had never
prouder
gone
of our
completely
boy.
silent,
University
never
of Durham's
disappeared.
finest."
I
And
called
in the
his
background,
office.
Marcy and my cousins
Warren
lifted
Financial.
champagne glasses,
How may I direct your
toasting
call?
to the future. To
Hi,
Braden's
Stephanie,
future,
it's Megan.
I wasn't
Is Daniel
anywhere.
in today?
Not even a
A
mention.
pause.
I don't remember standing up.
Too long to be
I don't
normal.
remember pulling on my boots,
Mrs.
grabbing
Warren.
my keys. All
I
I
thought
remember
you
is the
knew.
door slamming behind me as I stepped
Daniel
into the
took a
night.
personal
The
day
streets were
today.
slick from rain,
The
reflecting
knot in
neon
my
signs
chest
and
tightened.
headlights.
Oh,
I
right.
walked without
Must have
knowing where I
slipped
was
my
going.
mind.
Every
Thanks,
step
Stephanie.
cracking something open
I hung
inside
up
me.
and
For the
immediately
first
dialed his
time,
best
I
friend,
wondered what would happen
Eric.
if I just stopped
Megan?
trying.
Happy
What if I
birthday.
never came home for Christmas
Thanks,
again?
Eric.
What if
Have
I
you heard
stayed
from
in
Daniel
Sheffield
today?
forever, built my
Another
career,
pause.
my life, my empire,
What was it with everyone
and left
pausing
them to their
before
perfect
answering me
golden
today?
boy?
Not
But
since
that wasn't
yesterday.
enough.
Everything
The idea
okay?
flickered, then
I'm
flared into something
not sure.
bigger.
He wasn't
Something
home when I
monstrous
woke
and
up, and he
brilliant.
left his wedding
What
ring
if I didn't
behind.
just disappear?
He's not answering
what
his
if I made
phone.
myself impossible
His
to
ring?
ignore? I walked
Eric's
until
voice
the streets
sharpened.
emptied.
That's
the
not
pubs
good.
closed, and my
I
breath
know.
clouded the cold air.
Can you think
I
of
made
where
it
he
back to
might
my
go
flat at
if
dawn, shoes
something
soaked,
was
hair
wrong?
damp with drizzle.
Maybe
But
the
my
lake
mind was
house?
sharp as a blade.
You know how he
I
likes
sat
to
at
clear
my
his head
desk,
there.
my
The
architectural
lake house.
drawings spread out before
Our
me
weekend
like
retreat
blueprints
that we'd
for a life
purchased
I
3
hadn't
years
dared to
ago.
imagine.
A small
They
cabin
thought
2
they could
hours
forget
north
me?
of the
Overlook
city.
me?
It made
Fine.
sense. If
But I
Daniel
would
needed
build
space,
something
that's
so
where
big,
he'd go.
so undeniable.
Thanks,
They
Eric.
would have to see
I'll
me,
try there.
even if it burned them alive
Let
to
me
do
know
it.
when you find him,
It
okay?
began with the university.
And Megan,
Braden's University.
whatever's going on, I'm sure
Durham.
there's an
A
explanation.
prestigious,
But the
centuries-old
gentleness in his
institution
voice
tucked
told me
into
he was
rolling green
already
hills.
assuming the
It would
worst.
be impossible for
I
someone
grabbed
like
my
me
keys
to own
and
a piece
purse,
of it.
then
Or so they'd think.
hesitated.
I spent the next weeks
What if
researching.
Daniel came home while
Every
I was
spare
gone.
second I wasn't at my part-time design
should leave a
internship
note.
or finalizing my project.
As I reached for
I
a
didn't
notepad
sleep.
on the kitchen counter,
I drank too much
I
coffee.
noticed our shared
I
iPad
learned
lying
things about
there.
endowments.
Maybe
about
he'd
hidden
used it
debts,
recently,
about
and there
the
would be
quiet
some
desperation
clue.
of aging
I shouldn't
trustees
have
clinging
looked.
to legacy but choking
Some
on
part of
writing.
me knows that
I
now.
leveraged every contact
But in
I
that
had.
moment, driven by an
Clients,
increasingly
old
desperate
professors,
need to
friends
understand
of
what was
friends in
happening,
commercial real
I
estate.
tapped the screen.
And when I didn't have the answers,
It lit up
I
immediately.
hunted them down like prey.
Open to Daniel's
Bit by
email.
bit, the path
The
revealed
message
itself.
displayed was sent this
The
morning
land
at
the university
6:18
leased for
a.m.
its
to
new
his
student
assistant,
housing was
Stephanie,
teetering on the edge of
taking a
foreclosure,
personal
owned
day.
by a holding company.
Please
half a
reschedule
world
all
away.
appointments.
With the
Will
right
be unreachable.
leverage, the right investment partners,
DW
I
below
could
it
buy
was
the
another
land beneath their
email.
feet.
This one from an
I saw the
address
bigger
I didn't
picture then.
recognize.
Not just Braden's
Chloe.parker87@gmail.com.
not just my parents' cold
The
indifference,
subject line read,
but a
"Re."
chance to take
Today's
the very
the
ground
day.
they walked
My
on
finger
and make
hovered
it
over
mine.
it.
By
My
the
breath
time I stood in
caught
front of my parents' house again,
my
months
throat.
later, when the ink on the deal
Then I
was nearly
tapped it.
dry, I felt like a
Daniel,
ghost haunting the
I
place
can't
I used to
believe we're
call
finally
home.
doing
I
this.
didn't ring the bell.
I've packed everything
I
as
walked
we
around
discussed.
back, just like I
Meet
had
me
when
at
I was
7:30
little,
at our
when I'd
spot and
sneak
then
in
we're
after
free.
late-night study
No
sessions
more
so I
hiding,
wouldn't wake
no more
anyone up.
stolen moments.
The grass was
I
freshly
know this is
mown,
hard,
the air
especially
heavy
on
with
her
the scent of
birthday.
roses my
But a
mother
clean
loved so
break is
much.
better.
Through the
She
kitchen
deserves
window,
someone
I
who
saw
loves her
them,
completely,
my parents,
and I deserve all
my
of you.
brother.
See you
They
soon.
were all laughing about something.
See, the
My mother's
iPad
hand
slipped from
brushed
my
Braden's
hands,
cheek the way
clattering
she
onto
hadn't
the
touched me
counter.
since I was 10.
Chloe.
My throat tightened,
The
but I
name
didn't knock. I stood
was
there until my
vaguely
legs
familiar.
went numb, memorizing
Hadn't Daniel
every line
mentioned
of
a
that
new client named
picture-perfect
Chloe
family
a few months
tableau.
ago?
Then I turned
My
away.
mind reeled,
Back
trying
to
to piece
Sheffield.
together when
Back
this
to
might
my
have started.
plans.
How I
I
could
was
have
going to
missed the
buy the ground they
signs,
stood on,
especially on her
and they would never
birthday.
forget me again.
The words burned
Before we
into my
jump back
vision.
in, tell us where
He'd
you're
chosen
from.
today
If
deliberately,
this story moves you,
my
please
birthday,
subscribe.
to
Tomorrow,
run off with
I have
another
a special
woman.
story for you.
Don't
I
remember
walked away
driving
from
to the
that
lake
house with a
house.
chill in my bones that no summer
The
sun could
2-hour
ever
journey
melt.
passed in a
My
blur
mind
of
replayed that
numbness,
night
punctuated
over
by
and over. My
moments
mother's
of
soft
searing
laugh,
clarity.
the glimmer in my father's
8
eyes
years
when
of
he looked at
marriage.
Braden,
The
way they all
fertility
seemed to
treatments
bend
we'd
toward
been
him
discussing.
like flowers to the sun.
The
But
anniversary
the
trip to
vision that
Bali
angered
we'd
me
planned
wasn't their happiness.
for next month.
It was the truth buried
All
beneath
lies.
it. They would never
When I
choose
pulled
to
onto
see
the
me.
gravel driveway of
So
our
I'd
lake
make
house,
them.
my hands
Back
were
in
steady.
Sheffield, my flat
Too
became less
steady.
of a living
I felt
space
disconnected
and more
from
of a
my
war
body,
room.
as if
Papers
watching
covered
myself
every
from a
surface.
distance as I walked to the front
Blueprints,
door and used my
contracts,
key.
maps of Durham's campus,
The
and the
cabin was
surrounding
empty,
properties.
but someone
My
had been
laptop
there
never
recently.
powered down.
2 wine
Half-eaten
glasses
takeaway
sat on the
boxes
coffee
stacked in
table,
corners. The
one
smell
with
of
a
stale
smudge of
curry
lipstick,
and cold chips
a shade I
competing
never
with the tang
wore.
of marker ink
I
and old
walked
coffee.
through each room
Every day after
mechanically.
my internship, I'd
The
sit
bedroom
for
told the
hours,
final
cross-referencing
story.
property records
Rumpled sheets,
and combing through
the scent of
online
unfamiliar
databases.
perfume,
Some nights
a
I'd
woman's
ride the last
earring on
train
the
to Durham,
nightstand.
then walk the silent streets.
Not mine.
Counting
Never
steps
mine.
from the university gates
I
to the
sank
back
onto the
fences
edge of
the
the
land
bed,
I was closing
finally
in on.
allowing tears to
I watched
fall.
the students through dorm
My
windows.
phone buzzed again.
Kids with futures as bright
Olivia.
as the city's streetlights.
Meg?
Never
It's
suspecting
been
that a
hours.
single forgotten daughter
What's going
was about to
on?
hold their keys to shelter.
I tried to speak,
It
but
wasn't
only a
just the
sob
land,
escaped.
It was the power that came with
I'm
it.
coming over,
Once I owned
she
the
said
property,
immediately.
the university would
Don't
have to
move.
pay me rent, and if they didn't,
I'm not at home,
I could raise
I
the
managed.
rates, enforce the
I'm at the lake
contracts,
house.
and once they defaulted,
lake house?
which the financials
Why?
told me they might,
Because
push
that's
my
where
stake
Daniel
deeper.
brought her.
if they thought they could overlook me at a
Her?
graduation party,
What are you talking
they were
about?
about to learn that
His
overlooking
mistress,
me came with a cost.
the woman he left me
The
for,
first investor I
today,
pitched laughed at me.
on my birthday.
An older man, greasy
The
hair
silence
pulled
on
back
the
in
other
a
end
tie,
lasted only
his
a
office
second
shrine to
before
dusty trophies
Olivia's
and cheap
voice
leather
came
furniture.
back, tight with controlled
He told
fury.
me I was dreaming too
I'll
big.
be there in 2
I
hours.
smiled.
Don't do
Took his
anything until I
biscuit from the plate
arrive.
on the table,
After hanging up,
ate it in
I
front of
sat
him,
motionless,
and walked
staring
out.
at nothing.
I went to the next
Then my
one,
gaze fell
and
on
the
Daniel's
next, and the
laptop bag in
next.
the corner.
Each rejection
He
honed
never
my
went
pitch
anywhere
like a
without
blade.
it,
I
which
learned
meant
to
he'd
answer
be
their
back.
questions before they asked
Or
them,
perhaps he'd left
to
it
show them the profit
deliberately.
that glowed just
Another
beneath
piece
the
of his
risk.
life he was
And when I found
shedding.
a partner, a private
I
equity
moved
manager
toward
named
it,
Rena Shaw,
driven
who
by
saw
the
in me
same
the hunger she'd clawed
self-destructive
her way up
impulse
with.
that had made me check
I
the
signed my
iPad.
name on the papers with a
More
hand that
evidence?
didn't tremble.
More pain?
The deal closed
What
on a
was I
rainy
hoping to
Tuesday
find?
in November.
Inside
never
was his
forget the way the
laptop,
ink
a
pooled across
notebook,
the last
and a
line of
small
my
velvet
signature.
box.
Like the
My
final
hand
stroke
trembled
of a
as I
painting
lifted
that had
it.
lived inside
Too
me
big
for
for a
years.
ring.
My heart pounded
I
so
opened
hard
it
I thought
slowly
it would
to
crack my
reveal a
ribs
beautiful
open.
emerald
For the
necklace.
first time in my life,
My
the ground under
birthstone.
my feet felt like it
There
belonged to me.
was a small
Rena threw
card
me a grin
inside.
over the polished
To my
mahogany
Megan on her
table.
35th birthday.
Congratulations,
The first of many
Annalise.
we'll
You
celebrate
just
in our
bought
new
the future of
adventure.
the University of Durham.
All
I
my
didn't
love.
celebrate. Not
Daniel,
yet.
I stared at
I
it,
had work to do.
uncomprehending.
I started showing
birthday
up to campus,
gift?
not just
From the
as a
husband
silent
who had
observer,
just
but as a
abandoned me for
presence.
another woman.
I rented a flat
And then I saw
in
the
Durham City
notebook.
Center.
I flipped it
Something
open to
sleek
find
and
a
spare, with floor-to-ceiling
handwritten
windows
list,
overlooking the cathedral
finished
spires.
paperwork,
I
birthday
wanted to
gift
see the
for
bones of
M,
this town
final
every time I
meeting,
looked up
wow,
from my
Chloe
laptop.
Ree,
Braden
Parker
didn't know
account
yet.
transfer,
Nobody did.
pack
I
overnight
wanted
bag for
him to hear it
surprise,
when the ink was
confirm
dry,
reservation
when the
our
lawyers finished the
vineyard,
last
get
strokes,
ring cleaned.
when the
My head
university's board
spun.
was forced to
Nothing
explain
made
to their
sense.
golden graduates.
The
But
emails,
their new
the empty
housing lease
bed,
payments
the
were
wine
being funneled
glasses,
into the
the
pocket of
lipstick,
the sister
they
they'd
all
left
told
off the
one
guest
story.
list.
But
I
the
wish I could say I
necklace,
felt
this
guilty.
list, they
But
suggested
guilt
something
is a currency
entirely
I'd already
different.
spent on them.
The sound
What I
of
felt was
tires on
something
gravel
sharper.
cut through my
A promise
confusion.
kept only to myself.
A car door slammed.
They would never forget me
Footsteps
again. I found
approached.
Braden's graduation
I
party
stood
photos
frozen,
again one night.
the
I
velvet
couldn't
box
help
still
it.
in my
His
hand,
beaming
as the
face,
front door
surrounded
opened.
by people who'd never seen
Daniel
me as more
stood
than the
there,
afterthought
his
in family
expression
group chats.
shifting from
I ran my
surprise to
finger over the
confusion
screen,
to alarm.
tracing the outline of my
Megan?
mother's smile. My
What are you
father's
doing
proud
here?
stance.
How
Then
did
I
you?
closed the file and opened the
This wasn't
project that
supposed
would
to
dwarf
happen.
all their small,
Yet,
polite betrayals.
Behind him appeared a
My
woman,
blueprint for the new
slim,
housing
dark-haired,
complex.
professionally dressed.
Because it wasn't enough
She
just
looked
to buy the
equally
land.
startled to see me.
I wanted to reshape
Mrs.
it.
Warren,
I
she
wanted
said,
my name on
I'm
something
Chloe
they'd have to
Parker,
look at every
your
single
husband's
day.
new client.
I spent months
She
drafting
glanced
the
at
plans,
Daniel.
each line a testament
I think
to
we
the
have a
nights they
problem.
left me behind.
Think we have a
I
problem.
met with city planners,
Think we have. For
filed
several seconds,
applications,
nobody
brokered
moved.
deals with local construction
I stood
companies.
clutching the velvet
I
box
talked to
containing
student
the
reps,
emerald necklace,
gathering every complaint
staring at
about
my
the old
husband
dorms.
and the woman he'd called
Leaks,
Chloe
mold,
Parker.
paper-thin walls,
The same name from
and
the
folded their
email that had
voices into
shattered my
vision.
world just hours
By
ago.
spring, the project was ready to
Client?
launch. I named it the
I
Row
finally
Residences.
managed, my voice barely
Subtle
above a
enough to sound
whisper.
posh,
Daniel
unmistakable
stepped
enough
toward
to
me,
sting.
confusion
The
etched
day
across
the
his
university
face.
president called me for a meeting
Megan, what's
was
going
the day
on?
It became real.
You weren't supposed to
I
be here
remember
until
standing in
tonight.
front of the bathroom mirror in my
Tonight?
new flat,
I repeated
smoothing
numbly.
down my hair,
For your birthday
adjusting my blazer
surprise.
collar.
His
I could
eyes
hear my
dropped to the
mother's voice
velvet
in my
box in
head,
my
her
hand,
cool
then darted
disapproval.
to his laptop bag open
Don't
on
wear
the
so much
couch.
makeup, Annalise.
Understanding
It makes you look
dawned
desperate.
in his expression.
Desperate.
You found the necklace.
If only
my
she
notes.
knew. I
Chloe
walked into the
shifted
boardroom
uncomfortably
with
by
my
the
shoulders
door.
squared, my
I should give you
paperwork
two some
crisp in a
privacy.
neat leather folder.
No,
The president.
I said sharply,
the
finding
tall
my
man with
voice.
silver hair and
I think
eyes
you
that
should
flicked to his
explain the
watch
email.
every 5 seconds.
Daniel and
Didn't
Chloe
bother to stand
exchanged
when I came
bewildered
in.
glances.
He gestured to the seat
What
across
email?
from him.
Daniel
Ms. Rowe,
asked.
We'd like to
I pulled out
discuss
my
your
phone,
recent acquisition.
opened the iPad's
I
synced
sat,
email app, and
crossed
thrust
my
it toward
legs,
them,
and let a
displaying
small
the
smile
damning
play at the
message.
edge of my lips.
Today's
Of
the
course,
day.
But let's be
I've packed
clear.
everything as we
It's
discussed.
not just an acquisition.
Meet me at
It's
7:30
an
at our
investment in
spot,
the future
and then
of
we're
this
free.
university.
Chloe's
He cleared his throat.
eyes widened
Be
as
that
she
as it
read.
may, we
Then
feel your rates are
unexpectedly she laughed.
aggressive.
The
I
sound
let the
was so
silence stretch.
incongruous with the tension in the
Outside
room
window,
that I
the
nearly
spring sunlight
flinched.
glowed on the old stone
Oh,
buildings.
God, she
Students
said,
drifted
covering
across
her
the quad,
mouth. I see the
backpacks slung over
problem.
shoulders.
Mrs.
The
Warren,
future laid out before
Megan,
them like a feast.
I corrected
I
automatically.
leaned forward, voice
Megan,
low.
I'm not
Then
having an
pay
affair
them.
with your
Or
husband.
find somewhere else
I'm
for
his
your students
client,
to live.
and I'm also engaged to
He
be married
sputtered,
this
some
weekend.
retort dying in his
My
throat.
gaze dropped to her left hand,
I'm offering you
where
better
an
housing than
impressive
you've ever provided.
diamond ring
I
sparkled.
continued.
How had I missed
Sustainable,
that
beautiful,
before?
modern, and your students
The email
want it.
was about a surprise
done the
I've been planning
surveys.
for my fiancé,
So President Whitcomb,
she
I
continued.
suggest you start
Daniel
seeing
has
me for
been
what I
helping me
am,
with
your
financial
partner.
arrangements to
Not your
purchase a
subordinate.
vacation property,
He leaned back,
our own
studying
lake
me
house,
like he was
actually.
seeing me for the first
That's
time.
why we're here
Maybe
today,
he was.
to finalize
When
the
meeting
paperwork for a
ended, I
similar
stepped back
property
into
down the
sunshine.
shore.
The
I looked at
ancient
Daniel,
stones of
who
the
was
university glowing
staring
warm
at me
around
with growing concern.
I could almost hear Braden's laugh
But you left your
somewhere on the
wedding
breeze.
ring, I
The
said,
echo of my
my
parents'
certainty
polite
beginning
small
to
talk.
crumble.
The clink
It
of
was on the
champagne
bathroom
glasses
sink
I
this
was never
morning.
invited to raise.
Daniel's hand flew
But
to his
now their
bare
world
ring
was tethered
finger,
to mine,
his
and
expression
they didn't
shifting
even
to
know it yet.
dismay.
It was petty,
I
maybe.
took it off to clean it last
Vindictive,
night.
definitely.
It was on my
But when
list.
you've been invisible
The
your
jeweler
whole
said the
life,
settings were
there's a
loose.
special kind of
He
satisfaction
patted his
in making
pockets
yourself impossible
frantically.
to ignore. One night,
I must have
finally
forgotten
gave in
to put
the
it back on.
temptation to confront Braden.
Megan,
I knew
did you
he'd be
think
at the new alumni
that you
gala.
were leaving me?
Fresh suit, old friends.
On my
The
birthday?
next step in his charmed
My
little
voice
journey.
cracked.
I slipped
The
into
empty
the venue
bed,
like a
the
shadow.
cryptic
My
email,
name not on the list,
your
but my
assistant
bank
saying you
account
took a personal
heavy enough
day,
to open any
the
door.
wine glasses
The
here.
hall shimmered
With
fairy
lipstick, the
lights.
rumpled sheets,
Laughter and music
wine
weaving
glasses.
through marble columns.
Daniel looked genuinely
Braden stood near the
perplexed.
bar, glass
We
in
all
hand,
turned toward the coffee
smiling that
table where
effortless
two
smile.
used wine
I took a
glasses
deep
sat,
breath,
one with a
squared my
distinctive
shoulders,
lipstick
and stepped
smudge.
into the light.
Chloe stepped
He
closer,
spotted me,
examining
and his face
them.
flickered. Surprise,
Those weren't there when we
confusion,
arrived.
Then something that might have
We
been
just
guilt.
got here about 5
Annalise,
minutes
what
before
are
you.
you? I
A
smiled.
chill ran down my spine.
Missed me at your graduation,
Then
little brother.
who?
His mouth
The sound of the
opened,
back door
shut.
opening answered
He
my
looked
question.
like a fish gasping for
A
air.
tall man with dark hair walked in, stopping
didn't know you'd
abruptly
want
when he
to
saw the
come.
3 of us standing in the
Didn't
living
you?
room.
I tilted
Jason,
my head,
Chloe
savoring
exclaimed.
the moment his
What are you
confidence
doing
slipped.
here? The
Funny,
man, Jason,
Because
looked
now you'll
equally
never
shocked.
be able to get away from
Chloe,
me again. He
I was
blinked.
just dropping off the...
What do you mean?
He stopped,
I
noticing
leaned
Daniel
in,
and me.
close enough that he could smell
Who are
the
they?
expensive perfume I
This
dabbed
is
on
Daniel
my wrists
Warren,
just for
my
this.
financial advisor,
Next
Chloe.
time you brag about your fancy
said
Durham degree,
slowly.
remember whose name is on
And
the
his
deed.
wife, Megan.
He
Daniel,
laughed, but
Megan.
it was shaky.
This is Jason Reeves.
You're kidding.
My fiancé.
I held his gaze.
Jason's surprise
unflinching.
gave way to a flash
Go
of
ask your
guilt before
dean.
he carefully
And with
composed his
that,
expression.
I turned away.
Nice
The
to
music
meet you.
swelled, the chandelier
How did you
sparkled,
get in?
And I walked out
Daniel
into the night
asked.
with the taste of victory
The back
sharp
door was
and sweet on my
unlocked,
tongue.
Jason said too
But
quickly.
even as the wind
I
tangled my
moved toward
hair,
the coffee
I knew
table,
this was
pointing
only
to
the
the wine
beginning.
glasses.
They
Are these
wouldn't ignore
yours?
me anymore.
Jason
True.
stared at the
But would
glasses,
they
then
hate
at
me?
Chloe, who was
Would they
watching him
try
with
to shut
growing
me out
suspicion.
again, this time from something bigger
Jason?
than a party?
Chloe's voice
I welcomed it.
had dropped to
Let
a
them
dangerous
come.
octave.
I'd built my fortress
Whose
out of
lipstick is
stone
that?
and ink and
The
signatures
back
they
door
couldn't
opened
erase.
again, and a blonde
them
woman in
try.
her 20s peered
This was
in.
the first strike.
Jason,
The next,
did you find the...
even I
She
wasn't
froze
ready
when
for
she
what
saw
I was
all of
about
us.
to do. The air
Oh,
outside the gala
the
smelled
pieces
of
clicked
spilled
together in an
champagne and
instant.
night-blooming jasmine.
The wine glasses,
I stood at the
the
edge
rumpled
of the car
sheets,
park, the echoes
the
of Braden's
unfamiliar
confusion
perfume,
still warm in my
the
ears.
woman's earring.
For a moment, I
Jason
almost
and this
let myself
unknown
imagine
blonde
that it
had
was
been
enough,
using our lake house.
that the look on his face
Not
would
Daniel
soothe
and
the
Chloe.
old, splintered wounds
Amber?
they'd left in me.
Chloe's
But the cold
voice was
truth
barely
was,
controlled.
It didn't.
My maid of
I bought
honor?
my place in their world,
A
yes,
thick,
but the price
uncomfortable
was hunger.
silence
Once you
filled the
taste
room as the
power after a
tangled web
lifetime
of
being
misunderstandings and
powerless, your
betrayals
appetite
became
grows.
clear.
I could
I
feel
wasn't
it
the one being
expanding in my
cheated on.
chest, like a
Chloe
fire
was.
I couldn't smother.
And I had jumped
My
to
phone
catastrophic
buzzed. A
conclusions
message
about
from
my own
Rena.
marriage based on
Asterisk,
circumstantial evidence.
Congrats on your first victory.
Daniel,
Ready for the next phase?
move to my side,
Asterisk,
gently taking the
asterisk.
velvet box from my
I
hand.
stared at her words
I was
until
planning
they
to bring
blurred.
you here tonight.
The next phase.
I've spent weeks
I didn't know
organizing a
what it
surprise
was
party
yet,
for your
but I knew
birthday.
it had to be bigger.
A party?
More
I
permanent.
echoed weakly.
Something that
Everyone's
would stand
coming
when
up
their
this
memories of
evening.
me faded.
Olivia,
When
Eric,
their polite
your
small
sister,
talk about
all
Braden's
our
future
friends.
drowned out every
He
trace
glanced
of my
at his
name.
watch.
I didn't sleep
Well,
that night.
in about 4
Back in my
hours?
flat,
I
stood
took
at
the day
window
off to set
and watched
everything
the
up,
cathedral lights
but I had
glitter
this
on the
final
river.
meeting with Chloe
I thought
first.
about legacy. How
I
my
leaned
parents
against
had built
him,
theirs on
relief
Braden's
washing
back.
over me in
How
such
they'd
a
watched me
powerful
drown in
wave
my
that
own
my knees
ambition
nearly
and called
buckled.
it independence.
I thought you
Legacy.
were leaving.
The word pressed into me like a bruise.
Never,
The university
he
was my
whispered,
first stake in
wrapping
it,
his
but it
arm
wasn't
around my
enough.
waist.
I wanted my name to
Across
outlast
the
every
room,
whispered
an
dismissal,
entirely
every
different
cold
drama was
shoulder.
unfolding.
I wanted it to be carved
Chloe
into
was
the city's
confronting
bones.
Jason and
By
Amber,
dawn,
her
I had my
voice
answer.
rising with
I
each
would build something
accusation.
that couldn't be forgotten.
Jason
An
was
entire
fumbling through
complex,
denials
not
that grew
just dorms,
less,
but a public hub,
convincing by
a
the
center that would
second,
feed the city's
while
veins
Amber
for
looked like
decades.
she wanted
And
the
it would
floor
bear
to
my
swallow
name,
her
not
whole.
hidden in some
How
fine
long?
print on a deed,
Chloe
but
demanded.
blazing across every
It was
brick,
just a few
every beam,
times,
every plaque.
Jason said weakly.
I pitched it to Rena.
It didn't mean
over bitter
anything.
espresso in a
We're
cramped
getting
cafe
married in 3
that
days.
smelled like burnt toast.
Daniel cleared his
she
throat.
listened, tapping her
Maybe
pen
we should
against
give
her
them some
notebook,
privacy.
her eyes narrowing
We
as she
stepped
weighed my
outside onto the
insanity
porch,
against the potential
the
profit.
sounds of the
A student
escalating
village, I
argument
said.
fading as Daniel
Retail,
closed the door
housing,
behind
green
us.
spaces. A
For a
place where
moment,
students and
we
locals
stood in
collide.
silence,
A place
the
they can't
afternoon
talk
sun
about without
warming my
saying
face
row.
as the emotional whirlwind of the
She
past few
arched an
hours
eyebrow.
began to settle.
You think the university will sign
I'm
off?
so sorry,
They
I
won't
finally
have a
said,
choice, I
leaning
said.
against the porch
They
railing.
need better housing.
I saw
They
that
need my
email and
land.
just
And if they
spiraled.
push back, I'll make the
Daniel
town want
took my
it so
hand,
badly they'll
his
override
thumb
any
gently
boardroom
caressing my
objections.
knuckles.
Rena
I should have
leaned
been
back,
clearer about
a grin
everything.
breaking through her careful
And I
mask.
definitely
You're
shouldn't
good at
have left
this.
my ring on the sink.
Ruthless.
That was
you remind
careless.
me of me before
He
I
reached
sold
into
my
his
soul to
pocket and
venture
pulled out my
capital.
birthday gift,
I smiled.
opening the box again.
I'm just getting started.
This was
The
supposed to
next
be the
months were
first
a
part of
test
your
everything I
surprise.
was made of.
The
I lost
emerald
friends.
necklace glittered
People
in the
who thought I was
sunlight,
too obsessed,
even
too
more
hungry.
beautiful than I'd
I let
first
them go.
realized.
I lost sleep.
It's
I
your
poured every penny of
birthstone,
profit back into
he
the project.
explained
I
unnecessarily.
brokered deals with local businesses
And
for ground floor shops.
He turned the
drew up
pendant over to
proposals for
reveal a
study
tiny
pods and
inscription on
co-working
the back.
spaces,
Look
invited
closer.
public art collectives
I
to
squinted
paint
at the
sprawling
delicate
murals on
engraving.
blank walls.
For new
I
beginnings.
pitched city council meetings.
New beginnings?
Hosted town
I
halls.
asked, looking
listened
up
to
at
every
him.
old man who hated
Daniel
student
took a
noise,
deep breath.
and every student who hated
I thought it was
landlords who
appropriate,
didn't fix their heating.
considering the news I
became
got
something
yesterday.
more than a forgotten daughter.
His eyes shone
I was
with
the
what I
architect
now
of my own legend.
recognized as
Braden called me
excitement,
once
not
during
guilt.
That stretch. It was
Remember
2
that
a.m.
fertility
I almost
specialist we
didn't
saw
answer,
last
but
month?
curiosity won.
My heart stuttered.
Annalise,
We'd
he
been
said,
trying to have a baby
his
for
voice
nearly
hoarse
2
with too much
years,
whiskey
with
or not
nothing
enough
but
sleep.
disappointment each
What
time.
are you doing? What does it
Daniel,
look like? I
He
asked.
called yesterday with
It
our
looks
latest
like you're
results.
trying to ruin me.
The treatment
Ruin
worked,
us.
Megan. The
Ruin
new
you.
approach worked.
I laughed
There's
so
nothing
hard I had to
stopping
wipe
us from
tears
starting a
my
family
eyes.
now.
Oh, Braden.
Tears welled in
I'm
my
not
eyes
ruining
as his
you.
words sank
I'm just
in.
making sure you remember
This
me
was what
when you're
he'd been
basking
planning.
in everyone's applause.
To tell me tonight,
He went quiet.
not that
I
he
could
was
hear him
leaving,
breathing.
but that our
Then he
greatest wish
said,
might
so
finally come
softly I
true.
almost missed it.
That's what
Why
I
do you
meant
hate
by
me so
our new
much?
adventure in the
The
card,
question
he
slipped through my
continued,
ribs like a knife.
wiping a tear from my
Did I
cheek.
hate him?
I
Or
wanted
did I
tonight to be
hate what he
perfect.
reminded me of?
All our friends and
My
family
parents'
here to
golden
celebrate
child,
both
the
your
living proof
birthday
that
and
love
this
could
new
be
chapter doctor.
traditional.
I
But
threw
I
my
didn't
arms
owe him
around
that truth.
him,
Go to bed,
burying my
Brayden,
face against
I
his
said,
chest.
and hung up.
I feel
When the
so
permits came through,
stupid.
I celebrated
Don't,
alone in my
he
flat.
murmured into my hair.
I ordered cheap
If I'd found
takeaway
what you
and danced
found,
barefoot
I
among
probably
stacks
would
of
have assumed
blueprints.
the worst,
The glow
too.
of my laptop
The
painting
door
wild
behind us
shadows on the
opened,
walls.
and
I could
Chloe
feel
emerged
the ghosts
alone.
Of every version
Her
of me
eyes
that had
red-rimmed,
sat at family
but
dinners,
her
waiting to be
posture steel
noticed.
straight. I'm
I
sorry
raised a
about
plastic
that,
cup of flat
she
cola
said
to
with
them.
remarkable
They raised
composure.
theirs back,
It seems
hollow-eyed
I
and
was the one
smiling.
being
The
deceived,
groundbreaking
not you.
ceremony drew a crowd.
Chloe,
The local paper
I'm
ran a
so
headline.
sorry.
Local
I said,
architect brings
genuine
new life to
empathy
Durham's
replacing
student
the
housing.
jealousy and
They called me
suspicion I'd
local,
felt toward her
like I'd
just
been
an hour
born
ago.
here, like I belonged.
She waved away,
Maybe I did now.
my sympathy, with
My
a brittle
parents didn't
smile.
come.
The
Of course
wedding's
they
off,
didn't.
obviously.
But Braden
But
did.
we still
He
have
stood at
business
the
to
edge of the
conclude,
crowd,
Mr.
arms
Warren,
folded
if
across
you don't
his
mind.
chest, his jaw
I'd
tight
like
enough
to
crack.
finalize the property
Afterward, he
paperwork.
caught up to me by the
It
catering
seems I'll
tent,
be needing
where
a
I was
place of
trying to
my own
balance a
after all.
champagne flute and a plate of
Daniel
cheap mini quiches.
looked at me questioningly.
This is your revenge?
I nodded.
He spat,
Go ahead.
low enough that the
I
nearby
should call
donors
Olivia
couldn't
anyway.
hear.
She's
It's not
probably halfway
revenge,
here by
I
now,
said,
thinking
picking at a
she needs to
quiche.
help me
It's
bury a
legacy.
body.
Isn't that what
As
Dad
Daniel
always
and
wanted
Chloe
for
went
you?
back inside,
His
I
eyes
pulled out
flared.
my phone to call
You don't get to
Olivia,
twist this
still
around.
processing the
But
emotional
I
roller
do,
coaster of
I
the
said,
day.
stepping closer.
From believing my
Because I
marriage
own
was
it.
over
And
to
one day,
discovering a new
when you send your
beginning was on the
future kids here,
horizon.
they'll sleep
All on
under
my
my
35th
name.
birthday.
Sweet dreams, baby
Some
brother.
celebration this was
He
turning
swore
out to
under his
be.
breath and
Was
stalked
turning
off.
out to be.
But I
Was
didn't
turning
chase
out.
him.
So let me
I
get
didn't
this
need to.
straight,
I'd made
Olivia
my
said,
point.
perched on
The
the
months
edge of
that
the deck
followed
chair
blurred
beside
into
me as
steel
we
and
looked out over the
concrete and
lake.
permits and headaches.
You thought
I spent
Daniel was
hours
having
on
an affair
site,
with Chloe,
hard
but
hat perched
actually
on my
Chloe's
head,
fiancé was
boots
having an
covered in
affair
mud.
with her maid of
The construction crew
honor,
learned my name
and they were
fast.
using your lake
They learned
house
I
to
didn't
do
take
it?
excuses, didn't accept
That about
delays.
sums it up,
Some of them
I
liked
replied,
me. Some
taking a
hated
sip
me.
of the
I
emergency
didn't
wine
care.
she'd brought when
They
I
all
called to
respected
explain
me.
the situation.
At night, I'd stand at the edge
Olivia
of the
shook her
foundation
head in
pit,
disbelief.
the city lights
And
blinking
all this
around
happened
me,
on your
and feel the
birthday,
hum of the
the same
machines
day
rumbling
Daniel
up
was
through my
planning to
feet.
tell you about the
I'd think about my
fertility
mother's
treatment results
perfectly
and
arranged
throw you a
flowers,
surprise
my
party.
father's dismissive nods,
The universe
Braden's
has a
brittle
twisted
smile.
sense of humor.
I'd think about the girl I used
Inside
to
the
be,
lake house,
small,
Daniel and
hungry,
Eric were
invisible.
setting up for the
She was
party
gone
that
now,
would begin in
buried
less
under
than
1,000
2
tons
hours.
of poured
After
concrete
Chloe
and
had
steel
left,
beams.
alone,
power is
her
a
engagement
fragile thing.
officially
And the
terminated.
more I built,
Daniel
the
had
more
called
I
Eric to
realized
come
how
early
quickly
and
it
help
could crumble
salvage
if
what
I
was
didn't
left
keep
of my
grip
birthday
tight.
surprise.
The city council loved my
I
vision.
still can't believe
until
you
they
jumped
didn't.
to, my
Neighbors
husband
who'd
is
once
leaving me
praised
so
my
quickly.
design now called
Olivia
me a sellout when
said,
the noise of
giving me a
construction kept
thoughtful
their
look.
children awake.
That's not
A
like
local
you, Meg.
reporter sniffed
You're
around my
usually the
financing,
rational
hungry
one.
for scandal.
I stared
Rena
out at the
warned me
water,
that our
considering
investors
her
were getting
observation.
skittish.
I
One
think
night,
it was
someone
finding his
spray
wedding
painted
ring.
blood money
He
across
never
the site
takes it
gate.
off.
I stood
I
there
twisted
at
my
dawn,
own ring
staring
absently.
at the dripping red letters,
And then
a
that
chill crawling
email,
down my spine.
it seemed so clear.
I ordered the crew to cover
But
it before
things
the
aren't
press could
always
snap
what
a
they
photo,
seem, are they?
But I couldn't scrub it from my mind.
Her tone held something
they
I
were
couldn't
right?
quite identify.
What if all I'd
Clearly
built was just
not,
a monument
I
to my
agreed.
own bitterness?
Though
But then
I do
saw
feel bad
Braden's
for
name
Chloe.
trending online.
Finding
Some
out your
scandal
fiancé
about
is
a
cheating
dodgy
with your
hedge
maid of
fund he
honor 3 days
invested in,
before your
losing
wedding?
Dad's retirement savings.
That's
The
brutal.
family hero.
Olivia
falling
hummed
off
in
his
agreement,
pedestal.
then reached for her
For a
bag.
moment, I felt a pang
Speaking
of
of your
something almost like
birthday,
pity.
I still have your
Then I
present.
locked my jaw
She
and
pulled out a
reminded
wrapped
myself,
package and handed it
I
to
didn't
me.
do that to him.
You didn't
He
have
did it
to.
himself.
Of course I
When
did.
my phone rang that night,
It's your
it was my mother.
35th.
I hadn't
That's
heard
a
her voice in
milestone.
nearly a year.
I
She sounded
carefully
tired,
unwrapped the gift to
old.
find a beautiful
"Annalise,"
leather-bound
she
photo
began,
album.
her voice trembling.
Opening it, I found it filled with
"Can we
pictures
talk?"
spanning my entire friendship with
almost said
Olivia.
no.
From
But the girl I'd
college
been
through
once
my
wanted
wedding to
hear her
holiday
mother say
gatherings
anything
and
that sounded like love.
weekend trips.
So I said
Liv,
yes. I
this
sat
is
in my flat,
amazing.
lights off.
Keep
the hum of
going,
the city below
she
me,
encouraged.
while she told me
The
Braden
last
was
page is the
struggling.
best part.
How hard it had been for them.
I
How
flipped
they
to the
didn't know
final
what to
page
do.
where I
He
found a
always
single
looked up to
photo
you,
of
you know,
Olivia and
she
me
said,
from
like
just
it was a
last month,
confession.
arms
A
around
laugh
each
burst
other
from
at her
me,
lakeside
bitter and raw.
cabin.
Is that why you
Tucked
didn't
into the
invite me to his graduation?
corner of the page was a
Silence.
small envelope.
Then,
Inside
we were
was
wrong.
a card that
I
read,
see that now.
"For your next chapter."
Do you? I wanted
Your
to
journey
ask.
inspired me
Or
to
do you
start
just
my
see
own.
that I have something you want?
Appointment confirmed for next
She asked
Tuesday
for
at
money,
2 p.m.
Not directly.
Dr. Melissa
She wrapped it in
Chen,
words like,
fertility specialist.
An asterisk family.
I looked up at
An
Olivia,
asterisk Braden.
stunned.
Needs time.
"You're starting fertility
I could have
treatments?"
said no.
She nodded,
I could
suddenly
have hung
looking
up.
nervous.
But power is a strange
After
thing.
seeing how you and
It makes you
Daniel have
crave
handled
the
the
moment you
whole
get to say yes
process,
or no.
the disappointments, the
I
hope,
let the silence
the
stretch
perseverance,
until she was almost
it made me
begging.
realize I don't
Then
need
I
to
said,
wait for the perfect
I'll think about it.
relationship to start
When
the
I hung
family
up, I
I've
felt
always
something shift
wanted.
inside me.
Live.
The next morning,
I
I
reached
stood
for
at the
her
construction
hand.
site, watching
You're
the
going to
sun
be be an
rise over my
amazing
steel
mother.
skeleton of a dream.
I hope so,
For the first
she
time,
said,
I wondered
squeezing
if
my
I'd chained
fingers.
myself to the very people
I've lined up a
wanted to
donor
escape.
through the clinic's program,
If maybe
and I was
to truly
hoping,
be free,
well,
I'd have to
that
burn it
you
all
might
down,
come with me to the first
even if my
appointment.
name went with it.
Since you're practically
But I
an
wasn't
expert on
ready.
the process by now,
Not yet.
I'd be
Instead, I
honored.
picked up my phone,
Tears welled
dialed
in my
lawyer,
eyes for
and
what
whispered
felt
the
like the
next words that
100th
would
time
change
that day.
everything.
But these
My
were
lawyer's
happy
voice
tears.
came through the speaker.
Our
Calm
kids could
and
grow up
measured,
together.
as if we were discussing
That's
nothing
what I
more
was thinking.
consequential than a routine
She
contract.
smiled, then
But
glanced
the
at
words
her
we spoke
watch.
that morning would become the
We should
fuse
probably
to a
go
bomb
help
I
the
was
guys.
planting.
Your
beneath
guests
every
will be
carefully
arriving
constructed
soon.
facade I'd built since the day they
Inside,
forgot me.
Daniel and Eric
I
had
want it
transformed the
airtight,
living room.
I told her.
String lights
No
twinkled from the
loopholes,
ceiling
no
beams.
sudden reversals.
A happy birthday
If they
banner
try to
hung
push
across the
back,
fireplace,
the fallout hits
and
them,
several gift
not me.
bags sat on a side table.
She hummed
The
thoughtfully.
wine glasses
And
that
you're
had
certain you
caused
want
so
to make
much
this public?
confusion earlier
My
were
eyes
long
drifted
gone,
across the construction
replaced
site
by
below,
champagne
where
flutes,
steel beams
arranged
crisscrossed
neatly
like
on
the
a
ribs of some
tray.
giant beast I was
Daniel
coaxing
looked
into
up as
life.
we entered, his face
It won't
lighting
work
up when
if
he
it
saw
stays
me.
quiet. You
Even
need to
after
see
8
it.
years of marriage,
All of them.
that look still made my heart
I
skip.
could almost feel my mother's
Just in
trembling
time,
voice echoing
he
in my
said.
ear.
We need a woman's
we
opinion
talk?
on the food arrangement.
So
I
polite.
moved to his side, leaning
So
into him as
desperate.
he slipped an arm
The
around
bitter
my
truth
waist.
was, she still didn't see
Everything
me.
looks
She only
beautiful.
saw what I could give her now.
Wait until
Money,
you see what else I
power,
have planned,
an open door
he
she'd
murmured
once
close
slammed
to
in
my ear.
face.
That
And I would
necklace
give it
was
to
just
her,
the beginning.
yes, but
Eric
on my
cleared his
terms.
throat.
In my time,
And that's my cue to check
I
on
hung
the
up
ice
and sat there for a
situation.
long while,
He
watching
headed for the
sun
kitchen,
claw its way
Olivia
up through
following
bruised
to help.
clouds. My
Alone
coffee
for a
went
moment,
cold.
Daniel
My
turned to
phone
face
buzzed
me.
with messages from
Are we
Rena,
okay?
from the project
After everything?
manager, from a local
That
council
happened
member
today.
wanting reassurances
I considered the
about noise
question,
ordinances.
thinking about the
But my mind
emotional
was
whiplash
elsewhere,
of the past several
spiraling backward
hours.
and forward through every
We're
cold
more than
Christmas dinner,
okay,
every
I
missed
said
phone
finally.
call, every tight
But I
smile
think we
Graydon
need
had
to work on
flashed
our
while I sat
communication.
invisible in the corner.
If I'd
When
known
I
about your
finally
meeting
moved,
with
it was to pull
Chloe,
open my laptop
or why
and
you'd
draft
taken
the
off your
statement
ring,
that would run in the local
you're
papers
right,
the next morning.
he agreed
A letter
immediately.
to the city, to the
And if I'd told
university,
you
to
about
my
the
family,
fertility,
but only the last part was written
specialists
between the
call right
lines,
away
the raw
instead of
edges
planning
hidden
this
behind my
elaborate
polished
surprise.
words. Asterisk,
But
asterisk,
then
asterisk.
it wouldn't have been a
The
surprise,
row residences
I
aren't
pointed
just
out.
buildings. They're a testament
Daniel
to the belief
smiled,
that nobody should be
tucking a
left
strand of
behind.
hair behind
They're
my
my
ear.
promise that this city will
True.
never forget those who
Though I
built
could
its
have done without the
foundations,
part
even
where
when they're not the ones
you
standing
thought
in
I
the
was leaving
spotlight.
you.
Asterisk,
I shuddered at the
asterisk,
memory of those
asterisk.
dark hours.
Asterisk, asterisk,
It felt
asterisk,
so
to
real,
every student
Daniel.
who feels unseen.
Reading
You
that
belong
email,
here.
finding
To
the
every
evidence
neighbor
here,
who fears change.
I've
This
never been
change is
so
yours too.
terrified.
And to those who would erase
I'm
me,
sorry.
thank you. You
His
taught me how to
expression
make
grew
my mark
serious.
unerasable.
I
Asterisk,
never want you to
asterisk,
feel that
asterisk.
kind of fear
I read
again.
it back twice.
From
A
now
smile
on,
tugged at the corner
no
of my
secrets.
lips. I knew
Even
it
for
would sting them.
surprises.
My parents,
We tell
the
each other
university,
everything,
Braden most
good
of
or
all.
bad.
But it would also remind them,
Deal.
every time they passed, my
I
name
sealed the
carved into
promise with a
stone walls of
kiss,
the city
which
they
was
tried to keep
interrupted
me
by the
from.
sound of car doors
The
closing
statement ran bigger
outside.
than I expected.
First guests are
A
here,
regional paper
Daniel
picked it
said.
up,
Ready
then
for
the
your
national
party,
one.
birthday girl?
Reporters camped
I
at the
nodded,
site gates,
pushing aside
hungry
the
for a
lingering
photo of the
emotional
woman who'd
exhaustion
turned
from
family
earlier.
rejection into real estate
This was still my
dominance.
birthday,
Some called me
and
a
now there was
hero.
even more to
Some called me
celebrate.
a vulture.
Over
I
the
didn't
next
care.
hour,
Every
our
headline drove my stake
closest
deeper
friends
into
and
the
family
ground.
arrived.
The calls
My sister
started coming
Kate and her
next.
husband from the city,
Old friends I
colleagues
hadn't
from
heard
both
from
our
in years.
workplaces,
Some wanting
neighbors
to
from
catch
back
up.
home.
Others hoping to get
Each
a
new
piece of my
arrival brought
momentum.
another layer of warmth to
Former
the gathering,
classmates who'd ignored me
another
in the halls
reminder
now
of the
sending LinkedIn
community
messages that dripped
we'd
with
built
forced
together.
familiarity. But the
When
one that
everyone
really
had
set my
assembled,
pulse hammering
Daniel
was an
clinked
email
his
from
glass
the
for
university's
attention.
alumni office.
Thank you all for
Annalise,
coming on such
asterisk,
short notice to
asterisk.
celebrate
We'd
Megan's
like to
birthday,
invite you to
he
speak at our
began.
upcoming alumni
Some of you may
Impact
not know
Summit.
this,
Your story
but
has
today
inspired
has
so
been
many, and we believe our
eventful.
current students would benefit from
A
hearing
ripple
how
of
you
laughter
turned
moved
adversity
through the
into
crowd.
success.
Eric had
Asterisk,
apparently been filling
asterisk.
people in
I read it
on the
3
day's
times, laughter
misunderstandings.
bubbling up my throat
But
until I had
that's
to
not the
slap
only
my
reason
hand
we've
over my
asked you
mouth.
here,
The same
Daniel
institution
continued.
that had let my
We
own
also have
brother's
some news to
graduation
share.
pass
He
without
looked at
so
me,
much as a
silently
courtesy
asking
invite
permission
from
to
me,
proceed.
now wanted me to stand
I
on their
nodded,
stage
stepping
and
closer
hold
to his
myself up as
side.
an example of resilience.
After a
The
long
irony
journey,
was too delicious
he
to
said,
ignore.
his voice
I
thick with
typed my
emotion.
reply quickly.
We've
Fingers
received
flying across
news
the
that our
keys.
latest round of fertility
Asterisk,
treatments has been
happy to
successful.
discuss. Let's
The
set a
path
date.
is clear for us to start the
Asterisk,
family we've been
asterisk.
hoping for.
Rina thought I was insane.
Cheers erupted,
Why
along
give
with a
them your
few
time?
happy
She
tears from
asked,
those who
nursing
knew
a
how long
coffee
we'd
in
been
my tiny
trying.
kitchen while we went over
My
site
sister
budgets.
pushed through the crowd to
You've
hug
already
me
made your
fiercely.
point. It's
I'm
not
so
enough to make a
happy for
point,
you,
I said,
she
stirring sugar into my
whispered.
cup, though I'd long since stopped
As the
tasting
celebration
sweetness in
continued
anything.
around us,
I want to
I
stand
found
on that
myself
stage,
watching Daniel
look
across
every
the
single
room.
one of them in the eye, and
He was
make them say
engaged
my name out
conversation
loud.
with Eric and a
She
few
whistled low.
others, but
Remind
his
me
eyes
never to
kept
get on your
finding
bad side,
mine,
Row.
as if he couldn't
Construction
quite
moved forward,
believe how
rain or
close we'd
shine.
come to
The Row
misunderstanding each other
residences
so
began to climb
profoundly.
out of the muddy pit.
I
like a
touched the
fortress
emerald
built
pendant
on
now
rage
hanging
and
around my
redemption.
neck.
Sometimes
For
I'd
new
stand at the
beginnings.
edge of the site with my boots half
Despite
buried
the
in wet
chaotic
earth,
start,
listening to
my
the clang of
35th
steel
birthday
and
had
the
turned
roar of
into a day
machinery.
of
It was
unexpected
music to me.
revelations
Each
and
hammer
renewed
struck a
commitment,
drumbeat that drowned out
both
the
to
old,
each other
familiar
and to the
silence of
future
being
we'd been
forgotten.
working toward.
But not everyone was
Penny, for your
celebrating.
thoughts?
Protests started
Olivia
popping
appeared
up
at my
outside the
elbow,
site.
offering a fresh
Locals who'd
glass
once
of
smiled at
sparkling
my
water.
town halls now held up
Just
signs
thinking
calling
about
me
how
gentrifier,
differently this day
a
could have
land thief,
ended,
a traitor to
I
my
admitted.
roots.
If I
Students who
hadn't
hadn't
found
bothered to
Daniel's
respond to
notes,
my surveys
or if I'd
now
left
posted
before he
rants on
arrived,
social media about
with
rising
Chloe,
rents. Some nights
but you
my windows
didn't,
rattled with
she pointed
shouted
out.
slogans and clattering
You
pots and
stayed.
pans.
You gave him a
Braden
chance to
didn't call
explain.
again, but his silence felt louder than any
Because I
protest.
wanted answers.
I knew he was out
Not
there
because I
somewhere,
trusted him in that
licking his
moment.
wounds while
I
Dad buried
confessed.
himself in
The
damage
guilt
control.
still fresh.
Mom sent a few more messages.
Olivia considered this.
Weak little apologies.
Trust
that read
isn't
more
always
like
blind
demands.
faith, Meg.
Asterisk.
Sometimes
Come
it's
home
being
for
willing
dinner.
to listen
Let's
even
talk
when
things
everything
through.
seems to point in
But
the
I
wrong
never
direction.
replied. My work spoke
Before
louder
I
than
could
any family
respond, the
reconciliation
sound of
ever
breaking
could.
glass drew
And
everyone's
then came the
attention
night
to the
that
kitchen
changed
doorway,
everything.
where
I was alone in
Eric
my
stood
flat.
looking
A
mortified
stack of
beside a
financial
shattered
reports
champagne
spread across
flute.
my table.
"Sorry,"
When my phone buzzed
he
with
called
a video
sheepishly.
notification.
Got
The
a little
title made my blood
enthusiastic
run
with the
cold.
toast preparation.
Row Residences
As
Fire.
people laughed and
Developing
moved to help
story.
clean up,
Asterisk.
Daniel made his way to
I
my
nearly
side.
knocked my chair over lunging
"Having
for my
fun?"
keys.
he
The streets
asked,
blurred past
his fingers
in a smear
finding
of neon
mine.
and rain.
The
as
best
I tore
birthday
through
I
the
never
city toward the
expected.
site. When
To
I got
have,
there, the flames
I
were already
replied
licking
honestly.
the half-finished walls.
"It's not over yet,"
Sparks flying
he
into
said
the
with a
dark
mysterious
like 1,000
smile.
tiny comets.
"I have one
Fire
more
trucks
surprise planned for
snarled the
midnight.
road.
Is
I
it a
pushed
surprise
past the
I'm going
police
to
tape
like,
until a
or another
firefighter
one that
blocked me
might
with
give me a
gloved
heart
hand.
attack?"
You
I
can't go any
teased.
closer, ma'am.
"Definitely
That's
the
my
first
building,"
kind," he assured
I
me.
shouted, my voice
"Though after
cracking like dry
today,
timber.
I'm thinking I should
I
probably
need
just
to
tell
know.
you."
Was anyone
"No,"
inside?
I interrupted.
He hesitated,
"Surprising.
then shook his head.
Myself.
No injuries reported.
Keep it a
We
surprise.
think it was said deliberately.
Despite everything, I trust
Arson.
you."
The word slammed
And
into
I
me like a
did,
blow.
more
My
deeply
fortress,
than
my
I'd
legacy,
realized during those
crackling
dark
and
hours when
collapsing
I'd
before my
believed the
eyes.
worst.
The heat singed my face.
Because when faced
Smoke
with what
stung my
looked
eyes
like
until tears
irrefutable
streamed down my
evidence,
cheeks.
some
In
part
that
of me
moment,
had still
I
needed
felt
to
something I hadn't
understand,
felt since the night
to
I
hear
read
his
Marcy's
side of the
text about
story.
Braden's graduation.
That was why
Small,
I'd stayed at the lake
powerless.
house instead of
But
driving
the difference
away.
now is that I wasn't that forgotten girl
I
anymore.
realized,
As
was
I
the
stood there,
foundation we
watching
would
the
build
fire
our next
devour
chapter
months
on.
of backbreaking work.
Not blind
Something inside
trust,
me hardened
but the
into steel.
commitment to listen,
By dawn,
to seek
the blaze was
understanding,
out. The
to
shell
give
of
each
my
other the
dreams
benefit of the
smoldered in
doubt,
cold
even when
morning light,
circumstances
blackened
suggested
beams
otherwise.
jutting like broken ribs.
As the evening
Reporters
progressed
were
and I
already
moved among our
gathering,
friends and
microphones
family,
pointed at my
I
face.
found myself
Questions
filled
flying so
with a
fast
sense of
they blurred into
anticipation
white
rather than
noise.
dread about
Rena
what midnight
arrived in a
might
flurry
bring.
of cigarette smoke and curses.
Whatever Daniel had
"You look like
planned,
hell," she
whatever
said, gripping my
challenges our
shoulder.
future held,
Good.
we
I
would face
rasped.
them together,
Let them see it.
clear-eyed,
Let them see
honest,
what happens when they try
and
to erase me
connected.
again. She squeezed
My
my
35th
arm,
birthday
eyes glinting
hadn't
with something between pity
started
and
the way I'd
admiration.
expected, but it was
What's
ending
next,
exactly
Annalise?
where I
I
needed to
turned back
be,
to the smoking
where I
wreckage,
needed to be,
the taste of ash
where I
sharp on
needed.
my
As
tongue.
the evening progressed,
I rebuilt.
the lakeside cabin
Bigger,
filled with
stronger.
the warm buzz
And
of
when I do,
conversation and
they'll wish
laughter.
they'd just invited me to that
Despite
damn
the
party.
chaotic start to
This
my
time,
birthday,
I
I
wouldn't just
found
buy the
myself
ground they stood on.
genuinely enjoying
I'd
the
become the
celebration
ground
Daniel
itself.
had planned.
Smoke clung to my clothes
Friends
for days.
mingled
I could
throughout
smell it
the
on my hair
tile,
when I tried to
open
sleep.
living
I
area,
tasted it in
spilling
the
onto
back
the
of my
deck
throat
where
every
string
time I
lights
stood at
reflected
the
off
edge
the
of
dark water
scorched construction
beyond.
site and kicked at the charred
My
debris
sister
with the
Kate
toe of my
cornered
boot.
me by the refreshment
The smell
table,
became my
her
shadow,
expression still a
my
mix of
constant
amusement and
reminder that nothing I
disbelief.
built would ever be
Only
safe
you could
if I
mistake
didn't
a
fight
surprise
tooth and nail
party
to
for an
protect it.
affair,
The
she
arson
teased,
investigation
refilling her
unfolded
wine
like
glass.
a slow grinding
Most
wheel.
people just pretend to
I
be
watched
surprised when they
detectives come and
find
go,
out.
watched forensic
Very
crews
funny,
bag bits of
I
melted
said,
wiring,
nudging her
watched
with
a
my
bored
elbow.
security guard pace the
You try
perimeter
finding
under
your
strings of
husband's
caution
wedding.
tape.
Ring
The
abandoned on the
newspapers spun
bathroom
rumors.
sink and see where
Some
your
said
mind
it was
goes.
students angry about
Kate's
rent.
smile
Others
softened.
blamed local activists.
Seriously,
who
though,
turned on
are
me
you
when they
okay?
realized my project
That
meant
must have been a
change they couldn't
terrifying
control.
few hours.
But deep down,
I considered
wondered if
her
it was closer
question,
to home.
watching
I
Daniel
wondered
across
if
the
my own
room as he
family had
chatted
dropped the match,
animatedly with a
hoping
group
I'd
of our
crumble under the
friends.
loss. I
I'm
didn't.
better than
If
okay,
anything, the
I
fire
admitted.
made me burn hotter.
It was like
While the city
having the
whispered,
rug
and my
pulled out
parents
from
sat
under
in their
me
big,
and then
echoing
suddenly
house,
finding
pretending not to know
solid
how to reach
ground.
me.
Again,
I called every
it
contractor
makes you
I trusted,
appreciate that ground
every
even
investor who
more.
hadn't fled when the
Poetic,
headlines flared.
Kate remarked.
I stood
But
in
I'm
a
still
dusty
going to
trailer
tease
next
you
the
about this
ruins
for
with
years
Rena.
to come.
Blueprints spread out
I'd
between
expect
us like
nothing
battle
less.
maps.
I laughed.
We're doing this again, I
The
said.
conversation
My
shifted as
voice
Kate
cracked from
updated
lack
me
of
on her
sleep,
latest
and
work
too many cigarettes shared
project.
intense
But I
conversations
found my
with lawyers.
attention drifting to where Olivia
this
stood
time,
alone alone on the
We do it
deck,
bigger.
gazing out
And
at the
we do it
lake.
smarter.
Something about her
Rena's
posture,
sharp eyes
shoulders
narrowed.
slightly hunched,
Your
arms
insurance
wrapped
payout will
around
cover some
herself
of it,
despite the
but not
mild
all.
evening,
You sure about
suggested she
doubling
needed
down?
company.
I met her
"Excuse
gaze and
me,"
didn't blink.
I said to Kate,
They set
making
a
my way
fire to scare
outside.
me back into the shadows.
Olivia didn't turn
I'm
as
not
I
giving them what
approached,
they want.
though she must have heard the deck
She lit
door
a
slide
cigarette,
open.
exhaled, and
I leaned
laughed.
against the railing beside her,
You know, Ro,
giving
you're the
her
first
space to
client
speak
I've ever
first if
had
she
who'd rather
wanted.
go down in flames than play
"I'm
it
having
safe.
second thoughts,"
I
she
respect
finally
it.
said, her
So we
voice
started
barely
again.
audible above the
And
lapping
I
of
made sure
waves
every
against the
pillar of my
shore.
rebuilt project was
"About the
fireproof,
fertility
both
treatments."
literally and metaphorically.
"Because?"
This
Because,
time, I held
what
my
if I'm being
contractors to even
selfish?
stricter deadlines.
She turned to face me,
Stronger safety
vulnerability
protocols,
evident
tighter
in her
budgets.
expression.
I hired
Choosing
a
to
PR
have a
team
child
to spin
without
my
a
story
partner,
so tight
without
it
that
choked
built-in
every rumor
support
before it
system
could
you
grow
and Daniel
teeth.
have.
I went on local radio,
I had never seen my
national talk
confident,
shows,
decisive
online
friend
streams,
so uncertain.
anywhere I could hammer my message
Liv,
home.
being
I'm
a
here.
single parent
You
by
will not
choice
erase
isn't
me.
selfish.
In the
It's
midst of all
brave.
this, Braden
Is it?
resurfaced. Not
Or
with
is
an apology.
it unfair to
not
the
with
child?
trembling humility
Her
I might
eyes
have
shimmered
once
with
dreamed of,
unshed
but with a
tears.
demand.
I mean, look
I
at
found
today.
him waiting outside my
When you
site
thought
one night,
Daniel was
leaning
cheating,
against
you
the
weren't
hood of
just
some new
devastated
sports
for
car
yourself.
Dad must have bought to keep
You
him
were
distracted
devastated
from
for
the
what
hedge
it
fund
meant for your
scandal.
future family,
He called out
your
when he
plans
saw me.
together.
Annalise,
Reached for her
got a
hand.
minute?
Every
Every
family
cell in my
looks
body
different,
wanted to
Liv,
keep walking,
and any
but I
child would be
stopped.
lucky to
He
have you
looked
as their mother,
different.
with or without a partner in the
Drawn,
picture.
tired, like the shine
I
had
just
been
keep
scraped
thinking
off
about
him.
the
"You
deck
can't
door
keep
slid open
doing
again,
this," he said.
and Eric stepped
His
out.
voice was low, but his
There you
eyes
are,
darted
he
nervously
said,
toward the sight
with a
lights behind
relieved
me.
smile.
Doing what?
We're about to
I
cut the
asked,
cake.
arms folded.
Olivia
Building
quickly
my
wiped
own
her
life?
eyes and plastered on a
Rubbing
smile.
it in our faces, he snapped.
Can't miss that,
Mom's a wreck.
she said with
Dad
forced
can barely show his
cheerfulness,
face at the club.
squeezing my hand
You've made
once
this
before
whole town
following
about
Eric
you.
inside.
A laugh slipped out of me.
I lingered for a moment
Short,
longer,
sharp,
making
bitter.
a mental note to continue this
It's always
conversation
been
with
about
her
you,
later.
Braden.
Olivia
I'm just
had been
taking my
my
share
rock
now.
through years of
He
fertility
stepped
struggles.
closer, lowering
I
his
intended
voice
to
like
be
he was
hers
afraid
through
someone
whatever
would
path she
overhear.
chose.
You think you've won?
Inside,
You haven't.
Daniel was waiting
You're
with a
making
beautifully
enemies.
decorated
People who
cake
don't
ablaze
forgive.
with candles.
People who don't forget.
As everyone
I
sang
leaned
happy
forward
birthday,
until our
I
noses
found
nearly
myself
touched.
overwhelmed with gratitude.
Good. Then they'll
Just
remember
hours
me.
ago, I'd been convinced
He
my marriage
flinched,
was
like he'd
over.
expected me to back
Now
down,
I was surrounded by loved
but I
ones,
didn't.
wearing the emerald
I turned on
necklace
my
Daniel
heel,
had given
boots
me,
crunching over
looking
gravel,
forward to the
and left him
future we would
standing
build
there
together.
Under the buzz of the security
Make a
floodlights.
wish, Daniel whispered as
The
the
second
song
build rose
concluded.
from the ashes faster than
I closed
the
my
first.
eyes, drew
Steel
a deep
and glass
breath,
and concrete
and blew out
fused
all
into something
35
that felt
candles
like
in one
armor around
go.
my heart. By the
The
time
party
the final beam
continued
was
for another
placed,
hour
the
before
row
guests began to
residences were
depart,
no longer just student
each leaving
housing.
with warm
They were a
hugs and
fortress, a
congratulations
campus
on both
heartbeat,
my
a hub
birthday
for
and
local
our fertility
businesses,
news.
artists, students, and
Soon
dreamers
only
like I'd
Kate,
once
her
been.
husband Olivia,
The
and
city came
Eric
back
remained,
around.
helping with
Protesters
cleanup
turned
while
to supporters
suppressing
when they saw the
yawns.
jobs it brought.
You
Students
should all
applied
head
in
back,
droves when they
Daniel
realized I'd made rents
suggested,
fair,
noting the
and the
time.
living standards light
It's
years
almost
beyond the moldy
midnight and the
flats they'd
drive
been
is
stuck
pretty
with
dark.
before. My name was on
Are
every
you
lease,
sure?
every
Kate
contract,
asked,
every press
glancing
release.
around at the
One
remaining
night,
party
I stood on
debris.
the rooftop garden of
We
the
can
new
stay and
Central
finish
Tower,
cleaning.
staring out over Durham's
Absolutely,
cathedral
I assured
spires.
her.
My
The
breath
rest can wait
frosting in
until
the winter
morning.
air. It was beautiful.
After a final
It
round
was
of
mine.
hugs and
And
goodbyes,
yet,
we
beneath the
watched
pride
their
was something
headlights
colder,
disappear down the
an
gravel
echo.
driveway,
Because no matter
leaving
how high I
Daniel and
built,
me
the
alone
memory
in
of
the
that
suddenly
text,
quiet cabin.
asterisk, did you make it home safe
Did you
after
have
the
a
big
good
bash?
birthday,
Asterisk,
despite
still
everything?
thrummed under my skin like
He
a
asked,
bruise.
wrapping his
1 week
arms
before the grand
around me
opening,
from
my
behind
mother
as we
called
stood in the
again.
doorway.
This time,
The
she didn't try
best?
to hide her
I
fear.
said truthfully. Though maybe
Annalise,
next year we
she
can
said,
skip the part
her
where I
voice
think you're
papery with
leaving me.
exhaustion.
Deal.
Your father's not
He
well.
kissed the top
Braden's
of my
worse.
head.
We need you.
It's almost
Please.
midnight.
I stared
Ready
at
for
the
your
blue
final
glow of the
surprise?
city lights outside my window.
Curiosity piqued.
You need
I
me.
turned in his
Or
arms.
you want what I have.
I thought the
There
necklace
was
and
a
party
silence on the line so
were the
heavy it
surprise.
almost knocked me to the floor.
Those were just the beginning.
When she finally spoke,
Taking
it was
my
barely a
hand,
whisper.
he led me back out onto the
Both.
deck.
I almost
Close your
hung up.
eyes. I
Almost.
complied,
But then
feeling
I
the
thought about
cool
all
night
the years
air
I'd
against
waited
my
for this
skin
moment.
as Daniel
When she
guided
would
me
have to
further
say my
onto the
name,
deck.
like a prayer,
The sounds of the
like a
lake
plea.
surrounded us.
So I
Gentle
told her I'd
waves,
come to
distant
dinner.
loon calls,
Just
the
once.
rustle of leaves in the
It was
breeze.
a trap, of course.
Okay,
Not theirs.
he said,
Mine.
positioning me
Because I
carefully.
needed to see them,
Open
face
them.
to face.
I
When they
opened my
realized they'd
eyes to
raised a
find the
ghost
lake
they could never bury
transformed.
again.
Dozens
I
of
arrived at the
paper
old family
lanterns
house
floated
in a black car
on the
with
water,
tinted
their
windows.
soft glow
My
creating
name
a
in the
path of light
headlines,
from our
my name
dock
on the
out into
deeds,
the darkness.
my name on their
Above,
lips,
the
whether
night
they
sky
liked it
was
or not.
alive with
Mom
stars,
opened the door like
more
she'd been
visible
standing
here
there
away
for
from city
hours.
lights.
Her face a mask
Daniel,
of brittle politeness.
I breathed. It's
Braden
beautiful.
sat at the table,
Look
pale
there.
and tense,
He
fiddling
pointed
with
toward the
his
floating
fork.
lanterns.
Dad was already half
As I
drunk.
focused,
Eyes
I
glassy
realized
as
they
he
weren't
gestured for me
randomly
to sit.
arranged.
We
The
ate in near
lanterns
silence.
formed letters
the
on
only
the dark
sounds were
water.
the clink of cutlery
Forever.
and the occasional forced
The lake
cough
where
when
we
Dad
first
tried
fell
to
in
pretend
love,
he still controlled
Daniel
this
said
family.
softly.
Halfway
The place
through,
where
Mom
we
reached for my
scattered your
hand across
father's
the table.
ashes. Where we decided to
"Annalise,"
start
she
trying for
said,
a family.
"we want to start over."
And now, where
I
we
studied
begin
her
a new
manicured
chapter.
nails, the diamond band
Tears
on her
blurred
finger.
my vision as the meaning
"You
of
want
his
my
gesture
money?"
sank in.
"No," she
Daniel had
protested.
always
"We want
understood
you
how
back."
special this place was to
Braden's
me,
fork clattered
how
onto his
connected
plate.
I felt to the
"This
memories
is
we'd
pointless.
created
She
here.
doesn't care."
How did you
I
manage
turned to
this
him
without me
slowly,
noticing?
the edges of my words like
Eric and I
razors.
set them up while you
"You're
were
right.
talking with
I
Olivia.
don't.
They're on
because I gave you
timers,
all the chances I
set to
could,
light up at
and you
exactly
left me out in the
midnight.
cold.
As if on
So
cue,
now
my
I
phone
get to
chimed
decide
the
who
midnight
sits at this
hour.
table.
My birthday was
Dad
officially
slammed his
over,
glass down,
but something
whiskey
new was
sloshing over his
beginning.
cuff.
I know
We're family,
today
damn
didn't
it.
go as
I
planned,
stood,
Daniel
the chair
continued,
scraping back with a
taking both
scream.
my hands in his.
Family is earned.
But I meant what I
Then
said
you
earlier.
Lost me.
No
I
more
left them
secrets
there,
between us,
brave and
even for
red-faced.
surprises.
Mom crying
Full
silent
transparency
tears.
from now on.
Dad muttering curses
Full
under
transparency.
his breath.
I agreed.
Outside, the air
He
smelled
hesitated,
like frost
then
and wood
reached into
smoke.
his
But
pocket.
to me, it smelled
Which
like
is why
freedom.
there's something
When
else
I
I
got
need to
back
tell
my
you.
Flat,
Something
I
I've
found
been
an
saving
envelope
for the
slipped
right
under my
moment.
door. No return
My
address.
heart skipped as he
Just
pulled
my
out an
name in careful
envelope.
block letters.
What is
Inside
it?
was a single photograph.
The complete results
construction
from
site
Dr.
before the
Chen.
fire circled in red
He
ink,
handed me the
and below
envelope.
it a message scrawled
I only
in
told
jagged
you the
black
good
marker.
part, that the treatment
Asterisk,
worked,
asterisk,
that
asterisk.
there
Next
are
time,
no more
it won't
barriers,
just be the building.
but there's more.
Asterisk,
My
asterisk,
hands trembled
asterisk.
slightly as I
I
opened
sat
the
down on the
envelope,
cold floor,
pulling out the
back
medical
against the
report
door,
inside.
the letter shaking
I
in my
scanned the
hand.
document,
They were trying
medical
to scare me,
terminology jumping
push
out at
me
me,
back into the shadows.
until I reached a highlighted
But
section
this was
halfway
my
down the
city now.
page.
My name,
My breath
my
caught.
future. I pressed my
this-
palm to the photograph.
Is this
felt
saying
the
what I
paper
think it's
crinkle
saying?
under my fingers,
Daniel
and whispered
nodded,
into the empty room.
his expression a
Come
mix
at
of
me again.
excitement
I dare
and
you,
apprehension.
because I had one last card
The
to play,
hormonal treatment
one
was
they'd
more
never see
effective than
coming.
anticipated.
And when I did,
Dr.
there'd be
Chen
nothing
says the
left for them
chances
to
of
burn but
multiple
their own
embryos
illusions.
successfully
This story
implanting
took
has
us a long
increased
time.
significantly.
If you like it,
Multiple,
subscribe.
I
Now,
repeated,
back to the
the
story.
word feeling foreign
I didn't
on my
sleep
tongue.
that night.
As
The envelope
in,
with its faceless threat sat
twins
on
are
my
a
kitchen
strong
table
possibility,
like a snake coiled in
he
the dark.
confirmed.
Its hiss
Maybe
echoing
even
through
triplets.
my apartment long after the city outside
The world
went
seemed
quiet.
to tilt slightly
I
as
could
I
have called the
processed
police.
this new
Should have,
information.
probably, but my trust
After
in people
years
wearing
of trying
uniforms
for
had
just
eroded
one
the same way
baby,
my trust in
the
family
prospect
had.
of multiples
So
was
instead,
overwhelming.
I sat by the window.
I wanted
lights
to tell
off,
you right
watching the
away,
glow of the Rowe
Daniel
residences in the
continued,
distance.
watching my reaction
my name
carefully.
shining on a building they'd tried
But I
to burn
didn't want
the
to
ground.
overshadow your birthday
I
with
thought
what
about
might be
Braden's
stressful
pale,
news.
pinched face at that dinner.
Stressful?
The way his eyes darted from
I
me
looked
to
up from the
Dad to Mom
report,
like a child,
a startled
hoping
laugh
someone would save
escaping
him
me.
from a nightmare of his own
Daniel,
making. I
this
thought about
is
Mom's trembling fingers when she
incredible.
reached for my hand. I
You're
thought
not
about
overwhelmed?
Dad's voice, thick with whiskey
Of course
and
I'm
spite,
overwhelmed,
when he'd barked
I
that we were
admitted,
family.
but in the
And
best
underneath it
possible
all,
way.
I thought about the
We've
single
wanted
photo
this
in
for
that
so
envelope.
long.
My
One
fortress
baby,
circled like a
two
target.
babies, however
If they
many
wanted
we're
a
blessed
war,
with.
I'd give them one. But it would be
Relief
on my
washed over
terms.
his features as
At
he
dawn,
pulled me into an
I called
embrace.
Rena.
Against
She
his
picked up on the
chest, I
third
added,
ring, voice raspy
though
with
we
sleep.
might need a bigger house.
It's 6 in the
He
bloody morning,
chuckled,
Roe.
the sound rumbling
I need
through
more
him,
security on site.
one step
I
at a
said.
time.
Cameras,
We stood there on the
night
deck,
patrols.
holding each
And
other
I want
beneath the
someone watching my
star-scattered
flat,
sky,
too.
the glowing lanterns
Someone
casting
threaten you?
dancing
She
reflections
asked,
on the water.
suddenly alert.
After the emotional
stared at the
turbulence of
envelope,
the day,
The black
from
markers slashing
despair to
across the
relief
glossy
to
paper.
celebration,
Yeah,
this quiet moment
and I think it's
felt
coming
like
from
the true
inside the
gift.
circle.
Happy
You mean your
birthday,
family?
Megan, Daniel
I
whispered.
mean, whoever thinks they can
And
scare
happy
me
new
into backing
beginning,
down.
I replied,
Whoever
sealing
thinks
the
burning
moment with a
building means I'll
kiss as the
fold.
floating lanterns continued to
unfolding.
spell out our future on the
Rena
dark
sighed.
water. Our future on the dark
know this is
water. Our
going to get
future.
uglier,
2
right?
weeks after my birthday,
I'm
life had
counting on
settled
it.
into a strange
The
new
security
normal.
firm she hired moved
Daniel and I
fast.
had returned to the city,
By the next
our
night,
daily
there were guards
routines
stationed at
resuming
every
with one
entrance to the site.
significant difference.
Cameras covering
I
every
now
angle.
attended fertility clinic
I watched the
appointments
feeds on
3
my phone
times a
like
week,
hawk, flinching at
preparing my
every stray
body for the
cat,
next
every
phase of
drifting
treatment.
shadow. But
The
nothing
possibility of multiple
Not that
babies
night,
loomed in
or
our
the next,
conversations,
or the next.
both thrilling and
Whoever had
terrifying.
sent that message was patient.
We should start looking
And
at
that
bigger
was what scared me
apartments,
most.
Daniel remarked
So
one
I threw
evening as we
myself
sat on
deeper
our
into the
living room
work.
couch reviewing
If
real
they were
estate
coming
listings.
for me, I'd make sure they had to
If
climb a
we're
mountain to get to me.
Potentially having twins or
grand opening
triplets,
of the Rowe
this 2-bedroom
residences was a
isn't
week
going to
away.
cut it.
A year
Let's
ago,
not get ahead of
I'd
ourselves,
imagined it would be the
I
culmination
cautioned,
of everything.
though I'd been thinking the
Proof
same
I was
thing.
no longer the girl
We
they
don't
forgot
even
at
know
the
if the
party.
implantation will
The
be
sister who
successful
didn't
yet.
matter. But
Daniel
now,
set aside his
it felt like a
laptop to
first
take my
strike in a
hand.
war that was far from
I know.
over.
But Dr.
Invitations
Chen
went out
seemed
to
very
everyone who mattered in
optimistic at
Durham.
yesterday's
City
appointment.
officials,
She
university
had
board
been.
members,
My
local
hormone
businesses,
levels were
alumni,
ideal, and
yes,
everything was
my family.
progressing
I
perfectly.
made sure their names were at
The
the top
embryo
of the guest
transfer
list.
was scheduled for
Let them
next
see it
week,
up close.
and then would come
Let
the
them feel the
anxious
weight of
2-week
what they
wait to
tried
see
to
if pregnancy
erase.
occurred.
Braden didn't RSVP.
I just don't want to jinx anything,
Mom sent a
I
single line
admitted.
email.
We've
We'll
been
see.
disappointed too many
Dad
times.
didn't bother at all.
Fair.
But I knew they'd
Enough, Daniel
They'd
agreed.
have to.
But maybe we
Because
could just
now,
casually browse.
Every polite
No
conversation in their
commitments.
circles began and ended
I was
with my
about to
name.
respond when my
The
phone
night before
buzzed
the
with an
opening,
incoming
I
call.
walked the site alone.
Checking the screen,
Security
I was
offered
surprised to
escort
see
me,
Chloe
but I
Parker's
waved them
name.
off.
We'd
I
exchanged
needed the
numbers after the
silence,
lake house
the hum
incident,
of the streetlights,
but I hadn't
the
expected
smell
to
of
hear
fresh
from her
paint and new
again.
concrete.
"It's Chloe,"
I needed
I
to
told
remind
Daniel,
myself that this
answering
wasn't
the
just a
call.
building. It was
Hello?
my proof. My
Megan?
ghost turned to stone and steel.
Her voice sounded strained.
I ended up in the rooftop
I'm sorry to
garden,
bother you,
where fairy
but
lights
I didn't
draped
know who
across
else to
trellises
call.
and young trees
I
swayed
sat
in the
up
night
straighter,
wind.
concerned
Below
by
me,
her
the
tone.
city pulsed.
What's wrong?
A
Are
living
you
thing
okay?
I claimed piece by piece.
Not really.
I could almost hear
She
my
gave a
parents'
hollow
voices
laugh.
drifting up from the shadows.
I'm at Lakeside
Asterisk,
Hospital.
don't embarrass
There's been
us,
an
Annalise.
accident. My stomach
Try to
dropped.
be more like your brother.
What happened?
Asterisk.
Jason was driving
you
with
work
Amber.
Too hard. You'll never
The
find
names of her
someone.
ex-fiancé
I laughed
and
into the
former
wind.
maid of
They were
honor
wrong
sent a
about
jolt of
everything.
recognition
I
through
hadn't
me.
found someone. I'd
They
found
were hit by
myself.
a drunk driver on Highway
By the
16.
time the first guests arrived
It's-
the next evening,
pretty
the
bad.
building gleamed like a beacon.
Oh my God, Chloe, I'm
I
so
stood by the
sorry.
entrance in a
I
tailored
gestured
black
to
suit,
Daniel,
hair pulled
mouthing
back,
hospital
smile
to
razor
explain my
sharp.
alarmed expression.
Rena hovered nearby, taking
But
mental
why are
notes
you
on
there?
everything from the caterer's
After what they
tardiness to the
did,
security guard's earpieces.
That's the thing.
She didn't
said,
say it.
her voice
But
cracking
I knew
slightly.
she was watching for trouble as much as I
Jason
was.
listed me as his emergency
hands.
contact.
I smiled
and
for
apparently
photos.
never
I listened to praise
changed
that
it
tasted
after
like stale wine
everything.
on my tongue.
The
And then,
hospital
just
called
as the
me.
speeches were wrapping
And when
up,
I got
I
here,
saw them.
I
Mom,
found out I'm still
Dad,
his medical
Braden,
proxy.
standing at the edge of the crowd.
That's
Mom
a lot to
clutched her
deal
purse
with,
like it was a lifeline.
I acknowledged,
Dad's face
trying
was
to
flushed.
understand why she
Eyes
was
darting
calling me
around the marble lobby
specifically.
like he was looking
The
for an
doctors
escape
need
route.
decisions made,
Braden
she
wouldn't meet
continued,
my gaze.
about his
I
care.
stepped up to the podium.
And I don't know
the
what to
microphone
do.
humming under my fingertips.
We were together
The
for
room
4
fell
years,
silent.
Megan.
I want to thank you all
Despite
for
how it
coming
ended,
tonight.
I can't just...
I began, voice steady.
You can't just
even though my heart
abandon
hammered
him.
against my ribs.
I finished for her,
This building isn't
understanding
just concrete and
dawning.
glass. It's a promise.
But you
A
also
promise
don't want
that
to
no
face
one,
this alone.
No student, no dreamer,
Exactly.
should ever feel like they don't belong
Relief
here.
colored her tone.
I let my eyes find Braden's.
Would you...
He flinched.
I
When
know
stood
this is a
outside my
huge
family's house
imposition,
years ago,
but
I
would
told
you mind
myself
coming
I'd
to the
never be
hospital
invisible again,
just
I
for
said.
moral support?
Tonight, I'm not invisible.
I don't have many friends
and
in the
neither
city,
is anyone
and
who
after
ever felt forgotten.
canceling the wedding,
The applause
most of
crashed
our
over me
mutual
like a
friends
wave.
chose sides.
Somewhere in the back,
I
Dad
glanced
turned
at
away,
Daniel,
whispering
who was
something
watching
sharp
me
to
with
Mom.
concern,
Braden
and made
just
a
stared at the
split-second
floor.
decision.
Afterward,
Of course.
I made my
Text
way
me
through
the
crowd like
details.
a knife through
I'll be
silk,
there as soon as I
stopping
can.
inches from them.
After hanging
Enjoying the
up,
party?
I quickly explained the situation
I asked,
to Daniel.
Voice dripping with acid
That's
sweet politeness.
unexpected, he
Dad
said,
glared.
looking confused.
This is a circus.
Why would she call you of all
Mom's
people?
eyes were glassy with unshed
I think I might be
tears.
the only
You didn't have to
person
make it
who
about
witnessed
us.
what happened without
Oh, but
being
I did,
emotionally invested
I
in
said,
either side.
leaning in so
I
only they
reasoned,
could hear.
already
You made me your
gathering my
ghost.
purse and jacket.
I made myself your monument.
Plus, finding out about
Braden
Jason
opened
and
his
Amber's
mouth,
affair
but the words
happened at
died
the
there.
same time I discovered
looked
you
so
weren't
small,
actually
so
leaving me.
breakable.
There's a
The
weird
same
connection
golden boy
there.
they'd propped up on
Daniel
my bones.
nodded slowly.
Before they could answer,
Do
a
you want me to
security
come
guard
with you?
tapped my shoulder.
No,
murmuring
I
into
think
my
it's better
ear.
if it's just me.
My pulse spiked.
I kissed him
Another
goodbye.
envelope, he said.
Don't
Left
wait
at the
up.
front desk.
This might take a
No
while.
return address. I took it with
The
fingers
hospital
that
was a
felt like
30-minute
ice.
drive
Slid
across
it
the
open
city.
right there. The
As I
lobby spinning
navigated
around
evening
me.
traffic,
Inside was
I
another
reflected
photo.
on how
This
quickly
time of
life
me,
could
standing
change
in my flat
from
window, staring out
planning
into
a
the
wedding
city.
to making medical
The angle
decisions
made
for an
my skin crawl.
ex-fiancé in
And
just 2
beneath
weeks.
It, the same
It put my
jagged
own
scrawl.
birthday crisis into
Asterisk,
perspective.
asterisk, asterisk.
I found
You
Chloe in the
rebuilt
surgical
once.
waiting room,
Let's see you rebuild
looking
yourself.
smaller than I remembered in an
Asterisk,
oversized
asterisk,
sweater,
asterisk.
her dark
I
hair
felt
pulled
every
back
hair
in
on
a
my
messy
neck stand up.
ponytail.
I looked past
When
the
she
sea
spotted
of champagne
me,
flutes
relief
and polite
washed
applause,
over her
and saw nothing but
exhausted
shadows.
features.
Rena appeared at my elbow.
Thank you
Voice
for
low.
coming, she
Do we
said
need
as
to
I
shut
sat
this
beside
down?
her.
No,
I know
I
it's
said.
strange.
My eyes cut
How
to
are
my
they
family,
doing?
their confusion
I asked
curdling
gently.
into something like fear.
Amber's in stable
We're not
condition,
shutting anything
broken
down.
arm,
She
concussion,
studied me.
some internal
What's the
bruising.
play, Ro?
Her voice was
I
detached,
held up the photo,
clinical.
the thread.
Jason's
They
still
want to
in
take me
surgery.
apart, piece
His
by piece.
injuries are more
Let's
severe.
show them I'm not so easy
Collapsed
to break.
lung, ruptured spleen,
Because for every
head
brick
trauma.
they tried to pry
They're
from my
not sure if
fortress, I'd lay
she
10
trailed
more.
off, unable
For
to
every
finish the
ghost they
thought.
raised to haunt me,
I placed my
I'd become
hand over
something
hers.
they could never kill.
I'm
Before we jump back in,
sorry,
tell
Chloe.
us where you're from.
The thing
If
is,
this story moves you,
she
please
continued,
subscribe.
staring at the institutional
Tomorrow,
tile
I have a
floor.
special story for
I'm
you.
still so
I didn't
angry
sleep
with
the
him.
night after the second
Furious,
envelope arrived.
actually.
I sat at my kitchen
But
table
I don't
with the
want him
photos
to
spread out
die.
before me.
Of
The
course
image of my
not,
own
I
silhouette
agreed.
framed by my
Those
flat
feelings
window.
can exist
A silent, haunting
simultaneously.
reminder that
You can
someone
be
was
angry
watching.
with someone and still
The city
care about what
glittered
happens
beyond
to
the
them.
glass, mocking me with its
The doctors
indifference.
need to know about
Rena
continuing
offered to move me
aggressive
to a hotel.
treatment if things things
She
go
insisted
south.
on it, actually.
She
but I
finally looked at
refused.
me, her eyes red
If
rimmed.
I ran now,
I'm still
they'd know they
legally
could chase me
authorized
out
to
of my
make
own
those
fortress.
decisions, at least
I'd
until
spent
our
years
would have
building the
been
city
wedding
into my
date when the
stronghold,
proxy
brick by stubborn
expires.
brick.
But how
I
do I
wouldn't
know
abandon
what's
it like
right?
a child who lost her toy.
It was an impossible
Instead,
question,
I did what I'd
one I
always
couldn't
done.
answer for her.
I worked.
What would
By
Jason
day,
want?
I stood with the
Chloe
contractors, ironed out
considered
lease
this?
contracts,
twisting
Met with
the empty
local
ring
business
finger on
owners
her
to
left
negotiate
hand.
the last retail spaces
He
under
always
the
said
row
he wouldn't want to be
residences.
kept
By
alive by
night, I sat
machines if there
hunched
was
over
no hope.
architectural sketches for my
But
next
he's only
project.
36.
Because if they wanted
There
to
might be
scare me
hope,
into
right?
stillness, I'd drown them
Before
in
I could
motion.
respond,
The thing about fear
a surgeon
is
in
that it sharpens
blue,
everything.
Scrubs
Every
approached.
noise outside my
Ms.
flat
Parker,
made my pulse
we've
race.
completed the first
Every
phase of
face I didn't
surgery.
recognize felt
First
like
phase
a
of
loaded gun
surgery.
pointed at
Chloe
my back.
stood,
But
gripping
fear
my
also
hand for
reminded me of
support.
who I'd been.
How is
The
he?
girl they'd forgotten at
We've
Braden's
stabilized the
graduation.
lung and removed the
girl who'd
damaged
stood
portion
alone
of
in
the
dark and
spleen,
decided she'd
the
never
surgeon
be invisible
explained.
again.
But the head trauma
Braden
is
called
concerning.
once.
There's
I let it go to
significant swelling in
voicemail.
the brain. We're
He didn't leave a
inducing
message.
a coma to give
The
it time to
silence between
heal.
us said more than
And
words
his
ever could.
prognosis?
2 weeks later,
Chloe's
I
voice
found my
was
car
barely
windshield
audible.
smashed in the middle of the night.
The next 24
A
hours
single
are
brick
critical,
lay on the driver's seat.
the surgeon
Shards
said
of glass
carefully.
glittering around it
We
like
need your
diamonds.
consent for additional
No note
procedures
this
if
time.
necessary.
Just the cold,
Chloe
creeping
signed the forms with a
certainty that
shaking
whoever was
hand,
doing this
the
wasn't
surgeon's
finished.
explanations washing
The police
over
took a
her.
report, but offered
When he
nothing
left, she
useful.
turned to me with hollow
Keep
eyes.
your doors locked.
I
Let
should
us know
call
if you
his
see anything
parents.
suspicious.
They live in Arizona. They
Useless.
should be here.
They didn't
That's a
understand
good
that I'd
idea.
built my entire life on
agreed.
suspicious things, on secrets
Is
no one wanted
there
to
anyone
name.
else who should
If I
know?
wanted answers, I'd have to
His
drag
brother.
them into the light myself.
And
I started tracing the
I
money.
suppose Amber's
Threats
family,
cost resources.
though I don't have their contact
Someone was paying
information.
for these scare tactics.
We spent the next hour
The
making
surveillance,
calls,
the intimidation,
arranging flights
the
for
messages
Jason's
slipped under
parents,
my door in
and
the dead
providing
of night.
information to
Rena and I
various
pored over
family
accounts,
members.
flagged suspicious
Throughout it all,
transactions,
Chloe
leaned
remained
on our
remarkably
contacts to dig
composed,
deeper.
though I
Late
could
nights
see the
turned
toll
into
it was
dawn,
taking
streaked
on
with the
her.
glow of my laptop screen.
When we finally had a
And
moment
then,
of quiet,
finally,
I ventured a
lead.
question that had
A
been
shell
bothering
company
me.
registered in the name of an old
Chloe,
family friend.
Why did you
Someone
come?
I hadn't thought about in
After
years.
what he did to
a
you,
man who'd been my
many
father's
people would have
drinking
told the
buddy back when
hospital to
Braden and I were
contact someone
kids.
else.
He'd once
She was
laughed at
silent
my
for so
drawings
long,
spread
I
across
thought
the
she might
dining
not
table,
answer.
Told me I'd grow
Then,
out of my little hobby.
Because I know what
I
it's
didn't
like
even
to be
remember
alone
his
in
name at
crisis.
first. But the company's
She picked at a
account
loose
fed into
thread on her
another,
sweater.
and another.
3
until
years
the money
ago,
trail
I was in a
circled
car
back to
accident.
my father's business.
Not as serious as this,
Not
but bad
directly.
enough.
He wasn't stupid.
Jason was traveling
But the
for
link was
work, and I
there.
had no family
Thin as a
nearby.
spider's silk, but
A
strong
stranger
enough to
stayed
hold a
with me
web
in
of
the
lies.
ER until my friend could
I
arrive.
confronted him at a fundraiser.
I never
He
forgot
and
that
Mom were hosting
kindness.
for some charity I knew
Her
they barely cared
answer
about.
silenced me.
I walked in uninvited,
Despite the
wearing a
betrayal
black
she'd
dress that
experienced,
shimmered like oil under
despite the public
chandelier light.
humiliation of
The
canceling
same
a wedding
people who'd
days
once
before
smiled
the
politely
event,
and asked
she
about
chose
Braden's latest
compassion
triumphs
over
now whisper
resentment
behind
when
their
it
wine
mattered
glasses when they
most.
saw me coming.
You're a
Dad
good
saw me
person,
halfway
Chloe
through his
Parker,
speech.
I said
His eyes
finally.
widened, the corner
She
of
shook
his
her
mouth
head.
twitching as he tried to hold
I'm
his
not
smile
sure
in
about
place.
that,
Annalise,
but I'm trying to
he
be the
hissed
person
when I
I'd
cornered
want to
him near the coat
encounter
check.
if our positions
This
were
isn't the time.
reversed.
It's exactly the time.
That's the
I said,
definition of a good
thrusting
person
the
in my
file into his
book.
hands.
A
Bank
nurse
statements. Shell
appeared to
companies.
inform us that we could
A
see
neat map
Jason
of his
briefly.
cowardice.
Chloe
You think you can
hesitated,
threaten me in the
then
dark
asked
and
if I
keep
would
your
come
hands
with
clean?
her.
You think I wouldn't
I
find
agreed,
out?
following
His
her
face
down
went
the
red,
sterile
then
hallway to the
white.
ICU.
He tried to shove the papers
Nothing
back at me,
prepares you
but I
for
didn't
seeing
move.
someone in a medically
You've
induced
embarrassed
coma.
yourself enough, he snapped.
Jason lay
This ends
unnaturally
now?
still,
I stepped closer,
tubes and
my
wires
voice low
connecting
enough
him
that
to
only he
various
could hear.
machines. His face
ends
swollen
when I
and
say it
bruised
does.
almost beyond
And
recognition.
if you ever come at me
Beside
again,
me,
I'll burn
Chloe
down
drew
more
in a
than
sharp
just your
breath.
reputation. I'll bury this
I'll
family
give you a
name so
moment,
deep, no
I
one
whispered,
will remember you existed.
stepping back toward the
He
door.
flinched. The
No,
great patriarch of
she
our
said
perfect
quickly.
family, shrinking
Please
before
stay.
the daughter he'd forgotten how to
She
control.
approached the bed cautiously,
Mom found me
as if
afterward
afraid to
in the
disturb
marble
the
foyer.
equipment.
She looked tired.
After a moment's
like the years were
hesitation,
finally
she
catching
reached
up
out to
her.
touch Jason's hand,
Annalise,
the one
please?
without the IV line.
Save it, I said.
We had everything
chose him every
planned,
time.
she said
Now you'll
softly,
choose to live with the
not
ashes.
looking at me. The honeymoon in
When I left,
Bali,
I didn't
the
look
house we
back.
were buying,
Let
the
them
5-year
stand
plan
there
to
in
start
their
a
rented
family once we
grandeur,
were
clutching their
established.
charity pledges
She
like
withdrew her
lifeboats.
hand.
They were sinking.
Now I don't
and
even
was
know
the
if he'll
storm.
wake up, and I'm not sure
Back
how
at
I
the Row
feel about any of
residences,
it.
I doubled my security.
You don't have to.
Hired an
No,
investigator
right now,
to shadow anyone
I told
who
her.
even looked at me wrong.
You just have to be
and
here,
yet the threats
making the
stopped
best
as quickly
decisions
as
you
they'd
can with the
started.
information available.
Maybe Dad
The
got
feelings will
message.
sort themselves out.
Maybe he realized I wasn't the fragile
We
shadow
stayed for
he'd
only a few
underestimated
minutes
all my
before the
life.
nurse
But
indicated
the
it was
damage
time
was
to
done.
leave. In
The
the
fear
hallway,
was still
Chloe
there,
suddenly stopped and
coiled
turned to
tight
me.
under my ribs. The
Amber's
city I'd
room is
built
down
felt
there,
less like a
she said,
fortress and more
nodding
like a
toward
glass
another
house now.
corridor.
Beautiful,
I should
but
check on her
brittle.
too,
So
shouldn't
I did the only thing
That's
I
what a
knew
good
how to
person
do.
would do.
I planned something
The question
bigger.
wasn't really
It
directed
started
at
as
me,
a
but I
whisper in the
answered
back of my
anyway.
mind. A wild,
Only if you feel ready for
impossible
that.
dream.
Being a
If
good
they wanted
person
to keep
doesn't
me
mean
small,
putting yourself
I'd
through
make myself
unnecessary
larger than their
pain.
hate could ever reach.
Chloe
A new
considered this,
development.
then squared
Not
her
just
shoulders.
housing, but an entire
I
community
want to see
hub,
her.
a library,
Unlike
co-working
Jason,
spaces,
Amber was
youth
conscious,
centers,
though
a
clearly
place that would
medicated.
feed Durham's soul
When she
long
saw
after I was
Chloe in the
gone.
doorway,
Rena thought
her
I was
eyes
out of my
widened
mind.
with fear and
You're
shame.
barely out of one fire.
You can wait
and you want
outside
to
if you
start
want,
another? She
Chloe
asked,
told me.
pacing my
Are you
office
sure?
with a cigarette
She
dangling from
nodded.
her lips.
I need to do this
isn't
part
about
alone.
revenge anymore, I said.
I waited in
It's
the
about
hall,
legacy.
unable to
I
hear
want
their
my name carved
conversation,
into this
but
city
watching
so deep
through
they'll
the
have to
window
bulldoze
as
it to get rid
Chloe
of me.
spoke
She
briefly
stared
to
at
her
me,
former
then
friend.
laughed.
The
A
exchange
sound that
lasted
cracked
only
through
a
the
few
tension
minutes
like
before
breaking
Chloe
glass.
emerged,
Then
her
let's do it.
expression
We
unreadable.
found the land within weeks.
Did you get what you
An
needed?
old industrial
I
lot
asked
near
as
the
we
river,
walked back to the
abandoned
waiting
for
area.
decades. The
I
city
think so?
council balked at first.
She didn't
Too expensive
elaborate,
to clean up,
and I didn't
too
press.
risky, too close
Jason's
to the
parents
historical
would
district.
arrive
But
early
I showed
the
up
next
at every
morning.
meeting, every hearing,
After making
armed
sure
with
Chloe
plans
had
and
everything she
projections,
needed,
and the
a
sharp
place to
edge of a
stay,
woman who drilled herself
transportation,
from dust and
food,
rage.
I prepared
One
to
night,
leave.
after a long meeting
Thank
that ended
you,
with another
she said as
deferral,
we stood in the
I found
hospital
Braden
parking
waiting
lot.
outside my flat.
For coming,
He looked
for
thinner than I
staying,
remembered.
for not judging
Shadows
me.
under his eyes deep enough to
There's
drown
nothing
in.
to judge, I assured
Can
her.
we talk? He asked.
What you did tonight took
I almost said
incredible
no,
strength.
but something in his
She
voice
shook her
made me
head.
step aside. We
It
sat
still
across
hurts
from each
so
other at my
much.
kitchen table, the
Seeing
same
them,
spot where I'd studied
thinking
my
about what
first
they did.
architecture blueprints.
But
The
somehow,
same spot where
being
I'd
here,
stared down those
making
threats
these
like they were
decisions,
ghosts. Why are you
it's
doing
helping
this?
me
He asked
let
finally.
go.
Why can't
Does
you
that
just let
make
it go?
sense?
I laughed,
Perfect
but there was no
sense,
humor in
I
it.
replied,
Let what go,
thinking of
Braden.
my own journey
the fact
on my
that you forgot I
birthday.
existed,
How the
the fact that
fear
you
of
all
losing
did,
Daniel
it wasn't like
had
that,
ultimately
he
led to a
said,
deeper
but the words
appreciation
sounded
for what we
hollow, even
had.
to him.
Different
It was
circumstances,
exactly
but
like
similar
that, I
lessons.
snapped. You want to know what I see when I look at
As
you?
I drove home,
I see the
I
party
found
you didn't
myself
invite me
reflecting
to.
on the strange
I see
connection
every
that had
time
formed
Mom and
between
Dad stood
Chloe and
behind
me.
you and let me
A
fend for
misunderstanding
myself.
had brought us
I see
together
the ashes of
initially,
everything they tried
but
to keep
something
me from
deeper had
building.
developed.
He
A
flinched.
recognition
I
of
didn't mean
shared
for it to be
humanity
this
in
way.
difficult moments. Daniel was
But
waiting up despite my
it
earlier
is,
instruction,
I said.
relief
I
washing over
stood,
his
the
face when
chair
I walked through
scraping
the
across the
door.
floor. And now
How
you
did
have
it
to live
go?
with it.
He asked,
Because I'm not
pulling
your
me
ghost
into a
anymore,
hug.
Braden. I'm the house you
Intense,
can't burn down.
I admitted,
He left without
sinking
another word.
onto the couch
I
beside
watched him
him.
disappear
Jason's
into the
condition
streetlight.
is serious.
A boy who'd
Chloe
never learned
handled
how to
it with
carry the weight of
incredible
his family's
grace.
silence. By the
And
time
how
the
are
city
you?
council approved my new
His
project,
concern was
my name
evident.
was more than just a headline.
This can't
It
have
was
been
a promise,
easy,
a threat,
especially with
a story
everything we've
people
got
told
going
their children
on.
when they talked about what it meant
I
to
thought
build
about the
something that
embryo
couldn't be torn
transfer
down.
scheduled for
And
next
deep down, I
week,
knew.
the
They could
possibility
try
of
to forget me
multiples,
again.
the
They could
life-changing
whisper
journey
and
we
plot
were
and hide
embarking
behind
on.
threats and bricks
Compared
and
to what
fire.
Chloe was facing,
But they'd never bury
making
me.
life or death
I was the
decisions for the
city
man
now,
who had
and
betrayed
I'd
her,
never let them
our
look away.
challenges felt
The
manageable.
months that followed
Even
were a grind
blessed.
of concrete and
I'm
compromise.
good, I said,
The city
meaning
council
it.
dragged their feet on permits.
Better than good,
Environmental
actually.
groups
Being
demanded
there
endless
tonight,
reports.
it put things
Money trickled
in
in slower
perspective.
than the expenses bled
Daniel
out.
nodded,
Rena fought
understanding
beside
without
me,
needing
teeth
further
bared, her phone
explanation.
constantly glued to her
Life
ear
can
as she broke
change
with
in an
deals that kept
instant,
the steel beams climbing
which is
into
why
the
we
sky.
shouldn't wait to start
Then
apartment
came
hunting,
the arson attempt.
I added,
Round 2.
surprising
This
myself
time
with
they
the
didn't
decision.
even bother with subtlety.
I don't want to
firebomb
jinx
thrown through
anything,
the side
but I
office
also
window
don't
at
want to
3 in the
waste time
morning.
being afraid of
The guard on
disappointment.
shift saw
His
the
eyes
flames
lit
in
up.
time.
Really?
No one hurt.
Really?
But the message was clear.
I curled into his
They'd
side,
failed to
suddenly
break me
exhausted,
once. They'd keep
but content.
trying. I
Let's
stood in
embrace all the
charred remains of the
possibilities,
office the
scary
next
as
day.
they
Soot
might
streaked
be.
across my jeans.
As
Watching
Daniel held me,
firefighters hose
I thought
down the
again
last
of Chloe
stubborn
standing
embers.
beside Jason's
Rena
hospital
came up
bed,
behind me,
confronting a
cigarette
future
dangling
nothing
from
like
her
the one
lips.
she'd planned.
Same
Her
suspects,
courage in the face of that uncertainty was
I
a
shook my
powerful
head.
reminder.
different cowards.
None of
same
us know
fear.
what tomorrow
She
holds,
flicked ash
but we
into the
can
blackened
choose how we
dirt.
face it.
And
With fear or with hope,
I smiled.
with resentment
teeth bared.
or with grace.
Same ghost.
I was choosing
Same
hope.
fire.
And after
They wanted
witnessing
me to quit.
Chloe's strength
They wanted me to
tonight,
pack up my
I
legacy
was more
in neat
certain
little
than ever
boxes
that it was the
and
right
slip
choice,
quietly
ever
back
that it
into
was
the
the right
shadows they'd
choice.
once
I
buried me
know.
in.
He
But
covered
every
my hand
attack,
with his.
every threat,
But whatever
every
happens,
whispered rumor
we face
just
it
made my
together.
resolve sink deeper.
My phone
like
buzzed
roots
with a
pushing
text
through
message.
stone.
Expecting
when the youth council
Olivia, I
protested
was surprised
my
to see
plans,
Chloe's
I
name
invited
on the
their leaders
screen.
into my office. I
Jason
sat
woke
them
up
down,
this morning.
let them spit their anger
Doctors
at
are
me,
cautiously
and then laid out
optimistic.
every blueprint, every
Thought you'd
lease
want to
agreement,
know.
every community partnership.
Good news about
I
Jason,
showed them the free
I
clinic,
told Daniel,
the
showing
tutoring
him the
center,
message.
the job training hub.
In the week
And
since
when
the
they left,
accident,
they weren't
I'd
my
been checking
friends,
in with Chloe
but they weren't my
regularly,
enemies either.
offering support as
Braden
she
showed up
navigated
again,
the
drunk
complex
this time.
situation with her
He
ex-fiancé.
pounded on my door at midnight.
That's a
eyes red,
relief,
fists
Daniel
clenched
said.
like he'd come to fight.
Are you going to visit them again?
You think you're better than us?
I had gone to the
He
hospital
slurred.
twice
You
more
think
since
this-
that first night.
This concrete kingdom
Once to meet
makes you some
Jason's
kind
parents,
of queen.
who were
I
quietly
didn't
grateful
answer.
for
I just
Chloe's
poured him
presence
water,
despite the
made him sit
canceled
on the
wedding.
couch.
And again
He
when
ranted
Amber
about
was
Mom,
discharged,
about Dad,
needing a
about
ride
old
since her
debts and old
family lived out of
balloons.
state.
He told me he was sorry,
Maybe
but it was the
tomorrow,
sorry of a man
I
who didn't know how to
decided.
change.
Today, I just
When he
want to go
passed out,
home
I
and
draped
rest.
a blanket over him and went back
The
to my
next
desk.
2 weeks stretched into
I
what
had
felt
floor
like an
plans to
eternity.
finalize.
I
Walls
returned to
raise,
work, trying to
promises
focus on
keep.
normal activities
river
while
hub took
hyper-aware
shape
of
through
every
storms and
twinge and
scandals.
sensation in my
I lost
body.
contractors who bailed. When
Was
the
that
threats
cramp
got too real.
implantation or
I
just
gained
digestive
allies who saw
discomfort?
what I was building
Was
and
my
wanted to be
fatigue
part of
pregnancy
something that
or
would outlast
anxiety?
their names.
Every
The
day
week
was a
before
new
the ribbon
exercise in
cutting,
restraint,
a letter arrived
stopping
at my
myself
office.
from taking an
No
early home
envelope,
pregnancy test
just a
that
single
might give
sheet of
false
paper
results.
folded into a neat square.
Daniel was
Asterisk,
my
asterisk,
rock,
asterisk.
distracting
You
me
built
with
this
apartment
from your
viewings,
pain.
cooking
What
special
happens
meals,
when there's nothing
and
left
never
to hurt
once
you?
betraying his own
Asterisk,
anxiety,
asterisk,
though I knew he felt it too.
asterisk. I
10
laughed
days
when
into
I
the
read it.
wait, Olivia
Not
called
because
with
it
her
was
own
funny,
news.
but because it was true.
I'm officially on the
They
schedule,
didn't
she
understand.
announced. Donor
Pain wasn't a
selected,
curse for
treatment
me.
protocol
It was my
approved.
foundation.
I start hormones
The night
next
before opening
month.
day, I stood on the rooftop garden
That's
of the new hub.
fantastic, Liv.
Wind whipping
Have you
my
told
hair around
anyone
my
else?
face. Below me,
Just
the
my
city
parents.
buzzed, streetlights
My mom
flickering
is
like
thrilled.
fireflies.
She's been
I
desperate
thought
for
about the girl
grandchildren.
who'd once waited for
My
an
dad's taking
invitation
a
that
bit
never
longer to
came.
adjust to the idea, but he'll
the girl
come
who
around.
promised herself she'd make
And
them
how are you
remember her
feeling
name.
about
Now they had
everything?
no choice.
She paused,
Braden came to the
scared,
opening.
excited,
Mom too.
suddenly aware that my apartment
Dad
has
didn't
sharp
bother.
corners and no
Or maybe he
childproofing.
couldn't stand to
She
see the
laughed,
ghost he'd
then
tried so
sobered.
hard to bury,
But
standing
mostly
on stage
grateful
with
that
a
I have you to
microphone in
talk
her
to about
hand.
all of this.
I spoke
Your
about
journey
community,
gave me the courage to
about
start my own.
forgiveness, about
Her
building
words touched
something
me
that couldn't be
deeply.
burned down.
We'll figure it
I
out
didn't mention
together,
the fire
whatever
bombs,
happens.
the threats,
Speaking
the
of
sleepless
which,
nights.
any
I
symptoms
didn't
yet?
have to.
She asked
My building
cautiously.
spoke for me.
Nothing definitive,
Afterward, Mom
I
hugged
admitted.
me. Her
Some
hands trembled
fatigue,
against my
a little
back.
nausea this morning, but
I'm
that
proud
could
of
be
you,
nerves. The
she
blood
whispered.
test is in 4
I
days.
pulled away, my
I'll
smile
be thinking
sharp
of
and
you,
sad.
she promised.
You don't
And
get
Megan?
to be.
Thank you for
Braden
supporting
slipped
me
away
through
before I
this.
could corner him.
After we
Some
hung up,
wounds would never
I found
close.
myself reflecting on
Maybe
how
they
much had
weren't meant to.
changed since my birthday just
As
a
the
month
crowd
ago.
drifted home,
The day
and the
I'd
city settled
thought
back
was
into
the
its
end of my
midnight
marriage
hum,
had instead
I
become
stood
a new
alone in the
beginning.
empty garden.
Not just for Daniel
The
and
river
me, but for
below
Olivia
whispered
too,
secrets to the
and in an
stones.
unexpected way.
I wondered if they'd
for
ever
Chloe,
forgive
as
me
she
for
rebuilt her
refusing
life.
to drown.
That
Somewhere in the
afternoon,
dark,
I received
swear
another
heard the
text
old
from
ghosts
Chloe.
laughing. I thought that
Jason's
night on the
being
rooftop would quiet
discharged
the
tomorrow.
ghosts. That
His
maybe the
parents are
hum of
taking
the
him
river
back to
below,
Arizona
the
for
hiss of
recovery.
wind through the new steel
Would you
and
want to
glass,
meet for coffee
would
before I
hush
head
the
back
old
to
voices
work
in my
next
head,
week?
whispering that none of this would last.
We arranged to meet at a
But
small
ghosts don't
cafe near
sleep
my
just
office
because
the
you ask
following
them to.
day.
The day
When I
after the grand
arrived,
opening,
Chloe
the
was
threats
already
came
there,
back.
looking
Settled
more
this
rested
time,
than when I'd
emails
last
that
seen her
vanished
at the
when I traced
hospital,
them,
though
notes
still
slipped under
carrying
my car
tension in her
windshield.
shoulders.
Always
Thank
the
you for
same
coming,
twisted message.
she said as I joined
Some
her.
ghosts never die.
I wanted to see you before everything goes back to
Rena caught me pacing
whatever
my office
normal
one
is
night,
now.
the shadows of the city
How are
slicing
you
through the
holding
blinds
up?
behind
I
me.
asked, accepting the
You're starting to
latte
look
she'd
like the
already
ghost
ordered
row,
for
she
me.
said, tossing a folder
Better than
onto my
expected.
desk. You want out,
She
now's the
twisted
time. We've made
a
enough to
napkin
walk
between
away.
her fingers.
I turned.
Jason's
laugh dry
parents
as
have been
bone.
surprisingly kind to me,
Out?
considering everything.
This is the part they don't get, Rena.
His mother actually
I don't
thanked
want
me for
out.
being there those
I want
first crucial
roots.
days.
They can dig them up,
That couldn't
burn
have
them
been
down,
easy for any of
but I'll
you.
plant them deeper.
It wasn't.
She squinted
it
at me through the haze of her
Was
cigarette.
healing in a strange way.
And when you
Chloe
can't tell
looked
the
up,
roots
meeting my
from the
eyes
rot
directly.
anymore, then I'll
I
build
got
over
to say
that
goodbye
too.
properly
She didn't
to the
say it,
relationship,
but I saw
to
it
the
in her
future
eyes.
we'd planned,
Pity,
to the hurt and
fear,
anger I've been carrying.
respect,
And Amber?
maybe a twisted cocktail
That's more
of all three.
complicated.
While the rest of the city
We talked
marveled at my
briefly
new
before she was
Riverside hub.
discharged. She
Articles
apologized,
praising my
cried a lot.
uncompromising vision,
Chloe
while others
shrugged.
cursed me for
I
driving
don't
up
think we'll
rents.
ever be friends
I
again,
began planning
but
my
I don't
next phase
actively
in
wish her
secret.
ill anymore,
It would be my
which is
crown
progress.
A project so
Definitely
impossible
progress.
they'd call it madness.
I agreed.
Until I made it real.
What about you?
An arts and innovation
She asked,
district.
changing the subject.
Abandoned rail yards
Any news
turned
on
into
the
studios.
baby
co-working
situation?
Labs, green space.
She gestured vaguely.
Housing for young
toward
artists
my
who'd
midsection.
never get a foot in the door
Not yet.
otherwise. A place
The
for the
definitive
city's
test
forgotten
is
to
in
find
3
the
days.
spotlight I'd once clawed into
I
existence for
hesitated,
myself.
then decided to
I met with
confide
city
in her.
planners behind closed
This
doors.
morning, I
My
thought I felt
blueprints spread
different,
across polished
but I've been
conference
fooled by
tables,
symptoms
while men
before.
in tailored suits shuffled papers
Chloe nodded
and pretended to see
sympathetically.
the girl they'd overlooked at every
The
family
mind
dinner.
is powerful.
Braden didn't call.
When I was planning
He
the
didn't come
wedding,
around.
I convinced
I told
myself I
myself I
had food
didn't
poisoning
care.
from the stress.
But some nights,
Turned
I
out it
caught
was
myself
just
scrolling
anxiety.
through old family photos.
Exactly.
The ones I deleted a
And
dozen
with potentially
times,
twins
and
at
always
stake,
recovered from
I'm
some
trying
hidden
not to
backup.
get
Mom
my
wrote me
hopes
letters
too
now.
high.
Long, rambling rambling pages about
Twins?
how proud she was.
Her eyes
How
widened.
Dad was struggling to
That would be quite the
understand,
plot
How
twist.
Brayden needs your support.
My life seems
Each
to
word felt like a
specialize in
stone
those
in my
lately.
gut.
I laughed.
She wanted me back,
We
but she
chatted
didn't
for
want to
another
see what I'd
hour,
become to get
moving
here.
from fertility
The
treatments to
council fought me
Chloe's
every
work,
step of the way.
my job, and
Environmental
eventually
studies,
to the lake house that
historical
had
committees,
inadvertently brought us
financial
into each other's
audits.
lives.
I stood in
I
front of them
finally
for
closed
hours
on my
at
own
each hearing,
place,
pointing
she
at
mentioned.
maps,
Not on
citing
the lake,
statistics,
but a small
painting
cabin
a
in the
future they
mountains.
refused to imagine until
Somewhere
it
I
was
can go
staring
to
them in
clear
the
my
face.
head when the city
And
gets
behind their polite
overwhelming.
objections, I heard the
That
old
sounds
echoes.
perfect.
Who does she
As
think
we
she
prepared
is?
to leave,
I was
Chloe
Annalise
handed
Rowe.
me a
I
small
was the ghost they
gift
made.
bag.
And ghosts don't die.
I got you
They
something.
build.
A thank you for
One
being
night,
there when you
after a
had
grueling
absolutely
council
no
session,
obligation
I
to
found
be.
Braden waiting outside my
Inside
flat.
was a
He
delicate
didn't
silver
knock.
bracelet
Just
with a
leaned
small
against the
charm in
wall,
the shape of a
shoulders
lotus
hunched
flower.
like he was bracing for an
It's
earthquake.
beautiful, I
You're going to
said,
break yourself,
genuinely
he
touched.
said when I opened
But you
the
didn't
door.
need to.
Been there.
I wanted to,
Survived it.
she
I
interrupted.
shot back.
The
stepping
lotus grows
aside.
in mud,
He didn't
yet
move.
emerges clean and beautiful.
What do you want, Braden?
It reminded me of
He
how
scraped a
something
hand
good
over
can
his
come
jaw.
from difficult circumstances.
Mom's not well. She's worried about
She
you.
smiled
She's
ruefully.
worried about her place at the table. I
Like a
said, voice
friendship
like
formed
stone.
because I was mistaken for
worried
your
I'll tear the table
husband's
down.
mistress.
He looked
I
up,
laughed at her
eyes ringed with
directness.
sleepless nights.
When you put it that way,
Are you? I paused.
we parted with
The
a hug
question
that
felt
felt
like a bruise
natural
under my
despite our
ribs.
unusual connection,
Would it matter if
promising
I did?
to stay
He
in
flinched.
touch regardless of where
Dad's
life took
talking
us
about
next.
suing you.
That
Says you're
evening,
dragging the
I
family
showed
name
Daniel
through
the bracelet,
I barked to
explaining
laugh.
its significance.
Through the dirt?
The lotus
The
metaphor
dirt
is
is where I
apt,
found my name,
he observed,
Braden.
examining
You
the
can't bury me
charm.
in something I already
Though I'm still a
own.
bit
He
amazed
stared
that
at
you
me
and
like he
Chloe
didn't
have
know who I
become
was
friends
anymore.
after how you
Maybe
first
he
met.
didn't. Maybe that
Life
was
is
the
strange
point.
that way.
When he left,
mused.
I went to my office.
My birthday
spread my
crisis
blueprints
led to
across the
Olivia
floor,
deciding
and
to
knelt in the middle
pursue
of them like a general
motherhood.
over a war map.
To us, finding out
Every
about the
line,
possibility
every
of
measurement
twins.
was another nail in the coffin
To a
of the
friendship
girl
with
who'd
someone
once
I
begged for an
initially thought was
invitation.
having an
But
affair
the
with my
threats didn't
husband.
stop.
Daniel
got
pulled me
bolder.
close.
Anonymous calls in the
Just
middle
3
of the
more
night.
days until we know for
Photos
sure
of my
about the
flat window
pregnancy.
slipped under my door.
3
I
more
moved from
days,
anger to
I
exhaustion
echoed,
to a cold
trying
kind
to
of
keep my
calm. If
expectations
they wanted
measured.
a final battle, they'd
But
get that
that night, as I lay in
Rena
bed,
wanted me to go
hand resting
public.
gently on my
Name them,
abdomen,
she urged.
I allowed
Call them
myself
out.
to feel a flicker
They'll
of
crawl back
genuine
into their
hope.
holes if you shine the right light.
Not just for a positive
But I
pregnancy
didn't want them
test,
crawling
but for
away.
all
I
the new
wanted them to
beginnings taking
watch.
shape around me.
I wanted them to
Olivia's
stand in the
journey,
shadows of what I
Chloe's
built
fresh start,
and feel the weight
and my
of my
own
name
evolving
pressing
story
down on
with
them
Daniel.
until they couldn't breathe.
Whatever the
When
test
the final
revealed,
permits came through
I knew
for the
that my
Arts
35th
District,
birthday
I held
had
the stamped papers in
marked
my
a
hands
turning
like
point.
relics. I called a
What
press
had begun
conference on
in
the
fear
cracked
and
concrete of the old
misunderstanding
rail
had
yards,
somehow
cranes
blossomed
and
into deeper
backhoes waiting like
connections and new
soldiers behind me.
possibilities.
Reporters
A
shoved
lotus
microphones
emerging
in my
from the
face,
mud,
their questions
reaching
a blur.
toward the light.
Are you afraid for your safety?
The light.
Who's behind the
The
threats?
day of the embryo
Are you
transfer
worried this is
arrived
too
with a
much?
mix of
I
sunshine
looked
and
straight
scattered
into the
clouds,
cameras.
weather that
You can't
matched my
kill a
emotional
ghost,
state
And you
perfectly.
can't kill a city's heartbeat.
Hope bright as the
Farrell will
sunlight,
remember every name
caution
you tried to
hovering
forget,
like the clouds.
including mine. Mom
Daniel
was
and
there,
I arrived at the
somewhere in the
fertility
crowd.
clinic an hour early,
I saw her weeping
too
into her
anxious to
silk
sit at
scarf,
home waiting.
Dad's arm a stiff
3
weight around
times
her
is the
shoulders.
charm, Daniel
Braden wasn't
said,
there.
squeezing
He
my
never
hand
came
as
when
we
it mattered
checked in at the
anymore.
reception desk.
The next morning,
This
I
was
found
our
my
3rd
card
attempt
doused
at
in paint.
implantation after 2
White letters
previous
screaming,
failures.
"Get out while you can."
Let's hope so,
I laughed.
I replied,
It wasn't
trying
even
to
good
keep my
paint.
voice steady
It
despite
washed
the
off in the
butterflies.
rain.
In my
But
stomach,
the messages kept coming.
the waiting room was softly
One
lit
evening,
with
a
comfortable
brick smashed
chairs
through
and
my
soothing
office window,
artwork,
glass exploding
designed to
across
calm
my
anxious
sketches.
patients like
the brick
us.
was wrapped in a strip of paper.
As we settled in,
Ghosts
I
can
noticed a
bleed too.
familiar figure seated
Asterisk.
across the room,
I called Rena
head
at
bent
3
over
in
a
the morning.
magazine.
They're getting desperate,
Olivia?
she said.
I called
Her
softly.
voice a rasp of whiskey
She
and
looked
insomnia.
up, surprise
Good,
and then
I
embarrassment
said.
crossing her
Desperate
features.
people make mistakes.
Megan,
And they did.
Daniel,
The private
I
investigator
didn't expect
I'd
to see you
hired
here today.
finally called
We
me with the proof.
moved to sit
Money-changing
beside
hands.
her.
Photos of a man
My
I
transfer is
recognized.
scheduled for 10,
Dad's old business
I explained.
partner. The same one who'd
What are you
run his
doing
mouth
here?
about me being a silly
Olivia
little girl with
hesitated,
dreams too big
glancing
for her
between
boots.
us.
The same one who'd
I-
thrown the first match at my
I decided to go
residences.
through with it.
This time he was caught
My initial
red-handed,
consultation is
paying
this
off
morning.
local kids to vandalize the
Joy
site.
burst through me.
I took it to the police.
That's wonderful.
This time
I
they
didn't know
listened.
you'd made up your mind.
When the arrest made the news,
It wasn't easy,
my phone buzzed all
she
night.
admitted.
Reporters,
After our
city
conversation at
councilors,
your birthday,
old classmates
I did a
who
lot
hadn't
of
spoken my
thinking.
name in years.
Talked to some
Mom
single
called,
mothers by
sobbing
choice,
into the line,
did
begging me
research.
to drop the charges.
She smiled.
Dad left a message,
Slightly.
voice trembling
Then
with
I
rage and
realized I was
something that
doing
might have
all
been
the things
fear.
someone does when they've
I didn't
already
answer.
made their decision,
I didn't owe them
but
anything.
need to feel justified.
Instead, I stood at
Daniel
the edge
gave
of the
her
rail
an
yard the
encouraging
next morning,
nod.
boots planted
That's
on
how
the
we
cracked
felt when we
concrete,
first started
and
this
watched the
journey.
first bulldozer roar to
Researching
life.
obsessively,
This
even
wasn't
though
just
we'd
another
already
building.
decided.
This
A
was my
nurse
last
appeared in the
word.
doorway.
My final proof
Megan
that they
Warren,
could try to bury
we're
me
ready for
again
you.
and and again.
My heart leapt
But
into
I'd
my
always
throat.
claw my way back up.
This was
I walked
it.
the perimeter alone.
Good
as
luck,
the sun climbed over
Olivia
the steel
said,
bones
hugging
of my
me
new
tightly.
dream.
I'll
Somewhere
be
in the
sending
city,
all
they
the
whispered
positive
about how
thoughts
I'd
I can
gone too
muster.
far. How
The
I'd pushed
procedure
too hard.
itself was
How
quick
I'd
and
sacrificed
relatively
everything
painless,
for a name that used to be a footnote at
anticlimactic given
family
the years of
parties.
treatments,
Let them
tests,
whisper.
and
I'd
disappointments
built
that
my
had led to
legacy
this
from
moment.
whispers and smoke and stone.
Dr. Chen
And when they
worked with
asked who did
focused
it,
efficiency,
who carved her name
explaining
into the skin of
each
this
step
city so
as the
deep it bled
carefully
hope.
selected
I wanted them to
embryos
remember
were
the answer.
transferred. As we
Annalise Rowe,
discussed, she
the
said
ghost
as
that
she
refused to
finished,
die.
We've
Some
transferred
people
2
think ghosts are
high-quality
bound to the place
embryos.
they died.
Based on
I
your
think they're
hormone
bound to the
levels and
place
the
they were
embryo
forgotten.
quality, there's
That's why
approximately
I
a
never really left the
60%
city
chance
that
of at
erased
least
me.
one
Why every
implanting
steel beam I
successfully,
raised,
and about a
every slab of
30%
concrete I
chance that
poured,
both will.
was a gravestone
And if
for the
both
girl I used
implant?
to be.
Daniel
When
asked,
the
holding
first
my
walls
hand
of the arts
tightly.
district
Then
climbed
you'll
up
be
from
having
the bones of
twins,
the old rail
she
yard,
replied with a
I
smile.
felt her standing beside
We'll
me.
know more in about 2
The
weeks
girl
when
in
we
the
can
cheap
perform the
boots,
first blood test for
clutching her
pregnancy
sketchbook,
hormones.
praying someone
2
would say her
weeks.
name.
The
I didn't
infamous
pity her anymore.
2-week
She'd
wait
become
that
my
every
shadow,
woman
my
in fertility
spine.
treatment dreaded.
The city called
That
the project
limbo
reckless.
between potential
Reporters
uncertainty,
whispered that
hope,
I'd bitten
and
off more
knowledge.
than I could chew.
For now,
But they didn't
Dr. Chen
understand.
continued,
I'd been chewing
regular
on rejection
activity
my
is
whole
fine,
life.
but
I'd
avoid
built my
strenuous
teeth on it.
exercise, hot
Rena stood
baths,
by my side
and try to
through every
minimize
council
stress.
vote, every community
She gave me a
forum
knowing
where
look.
angry neighbors hurled
I
accusations
know that last
about
part
noise
is easier
and
said
traffic
than
and
done.
gentrification.
As we
She
left the
took
clinic,
the heat I
we
couldn't
passed
deflect.
Olivia still waiting for
She
her
called me a
appointment.
menace and a martyr in
She
the
gave
same
us a
breath.
thumbs up,
And when we
mouthing,
got
"Call
drunk
me
together
later,"
in my
as we
dusty
headed for the
office at 3
elevator.
in the morning,
In
she
the
called
car,
me her friend.
Daniel turned to me before
Braden
starting
didn't
the
show
engine.
up again until the winter.
How do you
the
feel?
scaffolding finally wrapped the
Physically?
old station platform.
Fine.
He looked worse
Emotionally?
than before.
Like I'm
Hair
balancing
too
on a
long,
tightrope.
Skin pale like he
I
hadn't
placed
seen
my
the sun
hand
in weeks.
gently
He
on my
knocked on my
abdomen,
door while I was
trying to
elbow-deep
connect
in
with the
budgeting
microscopic
spreadsheets,
embryos now
trying to
hopefully
find money
finding
that
their
didn't
way to
exist yet.
implant.
You look
I
like
want to be
hell,
optimistic,
I told him.
but I'm
He
scared.
smirked weakly.
Scared.
You look worse.
They said late afternoon.
We sat
I
in
reminded
silence
Daniel
at my
for
kitchen
perhaps
table,
the 10th
the same
time.
spot where I'd once
That could
dreamed
mean
of
any
leaving
time
them all
between now
behind.
and 6.
He stared at the
Why
blueprint
don't we
pinned
sit
to
on
my
the
wall.
dock?
My
He
legacy
suggested.
in graphite lines
It's
and
your
taped
favorite
edges.
spot.
Dad's dying.
The wooden dock
he said,
extended
the
30
words
feet into
falling
the
like
lake,
stones.
ending with a small
I didn't
seating
flinch.
area where we'd spent
that
countless
supposed
hours
to stop
watching
me?
sunsets, discussing
shook
our
his head,
dreams,
eyes
processing
ringed with bruised
disappointments.
regret.
Today, it felt like the
wants
perfect
to
place
see
to
you.
receive news that would shape our
Why?
future. We sat
Braden's
side by
mouth
side,
twisted.
feet dangling
Because he
above the
wants to
water,
believe he didn't
hands
lose you.
intertwined between
That
us.
this?
My phone
He
rested
gestured
on my
around my
lap,
cramped flat.
screen up,
Blueprints,
volume at
security
maximum so we
feeds,
wouldn't miss
stacks
the
of contracts.
call.
That it didn't
Whatever
cost him
happens,
his daughter.
Daniel said quietly.
I leaned back, my laughter
We'll face it
scraping
together.
the quiet.
I squeezed his
He
hand in
never had me to
acknowledgement,
lose.
too emotional to speak.
Braden looked away. Mom's
At
not
4:43 p.m.,
She
my
thinks
phone
if you
rang,
come,
Dr. Chen's name
maybe.
lighting up the screen.
maybe what?
My heart lurched as I
cut him
answered,
off,
putting
voice
it on
sharp.
speaker so Daniel could
That I'll
hear.
forgive him?
Hello?
That I'll fold myself back into the
Megan,
family that
it's
buried me
Dr.
alive?
Chen.
He didn't
I have
answer. He didn't
Your
have
test
to.
results. I
When you
tightened my
left, he
grip on
hugged me.
Daniel's hand.
It was awkward.
We're both here listening.
We hadn't done that
There was a
since
brief
we were
pause.
kids.
Surely
Before
no more
Mom
than a
started using
second,
the word
but it felt like an
distraction.
eternity.
Every time she
Congratulations,
looked at me. Before
Dr.
Dad
Chen
told me
said
I was
warmly.
too ambitious for my own good.
You're pregnant.
I didn't go to
The
the
words
hospital.
hung in the air
Instead,
between
I
us,
worked.
almost too
I
enormous
poured
to
my grief
comprehend.
into glass and steel
Daniel's
and wide
hand
open
trembled in
gallery
mine,
spaces,
or
where
perhaps
kids
mine
who
in
once felt
his.
as small as I did
Really?
could stand in the light
I finally
and say,
managed,
"Look at me."
my voice
I
barely a
exist.
whisper.
But ghosts
Really?
cling tight,
She
even
confirmed.
to those who don't want them.
Your HCG levels
the
are
day
quite
Dad
high,
died,
which is
I
very
got the call
promising.
from Mom.
Based on
Her
the
voice
numbers,
was so fragile,
there's a
I
strong
almost didn't
possibility that
recognize it.
both embryos have implanted
asked for you.
successfully.
She whispered.
Twins?
I'm sure
Daniel's
he did,
voice cracked
I
on the
said.
word.
Then I hung
It's
up.
too early to
My
confirm
hands
through
shook for hours
ultrasound,
after.
but the hormone
Rage,
levels certainly
sadness,
suggest that
both
possibility.
too tangled to
We'll
sort
know
apart.
more in a few weeks.
At the
The
funeral,
conversation
I stood in the back.
continued.
Mom
Instructions for
didn't see me,
medications,
but Braden did.
scheduling the first
He
ultrasound,
gave me a small nod
cautionary
that said,
advice about the fragility of
you.
early pregnancy.
but I wasn't there
But
for
I was
Dad.
only half listening,
I was there
stunned
for
by
the
the
version of me
reality that
needed to
after
watch the
years
dirt
of
fall on
trying,
the last piece
of
the old world
disappointment,
that kept trying
of
to drag me
procedures
back.
and injections and
Afterward,
tears,
I went back
we
to
were
the
finally
site.
pregnant.
Snow drifted through the half-finished
When the call
framework
ended,
of the arts
Daniel and
district.
I sat in
The
silence
metal
for
beams
several
groaned
moments,
under the weight of
letting the
ice,
news settle
but they
around
held.
us like the golden
So did
afternoon
I.
light on the lake.
But the threats didn't
We
stop.
did it, he
If
said
anything,
finally,
they got meaner.
his voice thick
now
with
they knew
emotion.
I'd never leave, never
We did
run.
it, I repeated,
One night, I
tears
found the
spilling
word
freely
traitor,
now.
spray
We're
painted
having a
across
baby,
the temporary fences.
maybe two.
I stood in
Daniel
the cold,
pulled me
the
into
paint dripping
his
red
arms,
like blood.
and we clung to each
Rena
other on the
offered to
dock,
call the police
laughing
again.
and crying
I told her
simultaneously,
not to bother.
overwhelmed by
You're
joy
not
and fear
invincible,
and
Ro,
relief,
she said,
and a thousand
voice
other
rough with
emotions reasons
exhaustion.
impossible to name.
I know.
I can't believe
I
it,
said.
I kept saying.
But I am
After
inevitable.
everything, after
By
all this
spring,
time,
the project was weeks from completion.
after your birthday
and the city
disaster,
finally started
Daniel
to believe
added with
me.
a small laugh.
Local kids
That
signed
wasn't
up
a
for free art
disaster,
classes in
I
the
corrected
news
him,
studios.
wiping tears
Coffee
from my
shops
cheeks.
asked about leases.
It was a
A
revelation.
tech incubator signed on
I
for the top floor,
Hadn't found your
promising
ring,
jobs I'd never
read
had
that
when I was their
email,
age.
come up here looking for
Braden
you.
came by again.
You might never
sober
have
this
found the
time.
birthday gift or
He
my
brought a
notes about
bottle
the
of cheap
fertility
wine
treatment.
and sat
He finished.
cross-legged on my dusty
We might
floor.
have missed that perfect
Why
moment
didn't
of
you come
alignment where
sooner?
everything came
He
together.
asked, staring at
I
the
nodded,
unfinished mural
resting
on
my
the
head
far
on his
wall.
shoulder as we
A
looked
kaleidoscope of
out
color
over the
where the
tranquil
city's
lake.
youth painted their hopes over
It's
crumbling
strange to
brick.
think that one of the worst
Because
days
I
of my
didn't owe
life
him
turned into
anything,
one of
I
the
said.
best.
I owed myself everything.
Life's funny that way,
He nodded.
Daniel mused.
I'm sorry.
The things we fear most
what?
sometimes
I
lead us
asked,
exactly where we need
genuinely
to go.
curious. He
As the
shrugged.
sun began its descent
For
toward
letting
the
them make you feel
horizon,
like you were never
casting
enough.
long golden
For
reflections
being
across
the
the
reason you
water,
had to build
we
all
sat
this
wrapped in
just
each
to
other's
prove you're
arms,
real.
contemplating the journey that
swallowed
had
the
brought
lump
us
in
to
my
this
throat.
moment, and the one
not your
still
fault.
unfolding
It's
before
not mine
us.
either, but it's done.
Impulsively,
The past can't
I pulled
touch
out my
this
phone
place.
again. Who
He
are you
laughed.
calling? Daniel
Are
asked.
you ever going to forgive us?
Not calling.
I looked at him.
Texting.
My brother.
I showed him the screen
No
where
longer
I'd
the
opened a
golden
group
boy,
message
just a
to
man
Olivia
trying to
and
crawl
Chloe.
out of the wreckage of the lives
Positive
he lived
test. Possibly twins.
Maybe, I said.
More details
But not
soon, but
today.
wanted to share the news with
When
the
he
two
left,
people
I
whose
sat
lives
alone in
got
the
tangled up in our
half-finished
story
gallery,
in the
the
strangest
night
ways.
pressing in around me like a
Thank you
question I
both for
hadn't
being
figured
part of
out
this
how to
journey.
answer yet.
Responses
hummed
came
outside the
almost
windows.
immediately.
Somewhere in
Olivia.
the distance, the cathedral bells
Screaming.
told midnight.
I
My
knew.
phone buzzed.
It?
Another threat.
Calling you in 5 minutes
This
when
one
I
was
stop
simple,
crying happy
handwritten on a
tears.
torn scrap of paper. Ghosts can be exorcised.
Chloe.
Asterisk.
Congratulations.
I crumpled it and threw it in the
The
trash.
universe works in
I've
mysterious
been
ways.
exercising myself my
So
whole
happy
life.
for you both.
The opening day for the
They were
Arts
both
District
there at
arrived
crucial
under a
moments.
bruised sky.
I explained to Daniel.
Rain spattered the pavement.
Olivia when I thought
but
I'd
the people
lost
came
you.
anyway.
Chloe when we found
Kids
our way
clutching
back
their
to each
parents'
other.
hands. Artists
And now they'll be
carrying
part of
battered
what comes
portfolios.
next, he
Old
said,
neighbors who
understanding
once called me a
completely.
nuisance, now nodding
What comes
politely
next?
as they passed.
The phrase
stood on
seemed
the
to
makeshift
expand with
stage,
possibility.
my name on the
Nursery
plaque behind me,
preparations,
my
doctor
voice echoing off the
appointments,
steel beams
shopping
and
for
painted
2 of
brick.
everything if the twin
Look around
possibility
you,
proved true.
I said, the words
There
warm
would be
in my
challenges
mouth.
ahead, certainly.
This isn't just
Pregnancy
mine.
was just the beginning of an
yours.
entirely
It's for every
new
person
journey.
who ever felt invisible.
But sitting
For
there on the
every
dock
dream
with
that needed a
Daniel,
place to
watching
breathe.
the day gradually give way to
They
evening,
applauded.
I felt a
meant
profound
it.
sense of readiness.
But when I stepped down,
The path that had led us
Mom was
here,
there.
winding
Umbrella
and
in hand,
unexpected as it
hair
had
slick
been,
with rain.
had somehow
She
prepared
looked at
us
me the
for
way
whatever
she used
lay
to look at
ahead.
Dad, like she'd
My
lost
phone
something
buzzed
she'd
again
never
with a text
understand.
from Olivia.
I'm proud
Can't
of you,
wait to be there for
she
all of
said,
it.
her voice
Auntie
so
Liv
quiet
has
I
a
almost
nice
missed
ring
it
to
over
it,
the patter of
don't.
the rain.
You think?
You don't have
I
to be,
smiled,
I
thinking
said.
of the parallel
I'm proud of
journeys
me.
we were now embarking on.
She reached for my hand.
Olivia pursuing single
I let her
motherhood
take
by
it.
choice.
For a heartbeat,
Daniel and
we were
I
just mother
finally
and daughter
expecting
again.
after years of trying.
Then I pulled away.
And even Chloe rebuilding
I
her
have to
life
check the
after
roof, I
unexpected
lied.
betrayal.
But really,
What are
I
you
needed
thinking
the wind,
about?
the rain.
Daniel asked,
I
noticing
climbed
my
the stairs
expression.
to the top floor.
About how
where the
different
city
our lives
stretched out
looked a
below
month
like a
ago,
promise
I
kept.
replied.
The ghosts
How one
came
day,
too.
my
I felt them in the
birthday,
creak of the
changed
beams,
everything.
the brush of air against my
Not
neck.
everything, he
But they
corrected
didn't scare me
gently.
anymore.
It
They were my
changed our
witnesses now.
perspective,
The
showed us
ghosts
what
didn't
really
leave When the
matters.
applause died down.
But the love was
they
always
lingered
there.
in the echoes of my
The
footsteps on
foundation
the polished
solid.
floors of the Arts District.
We just needed to remember
in the
that.
hush of the river drifting past
As
my windows
twilight
at
settled
night.
over the
I
lake,
felt them most
we
when I was
finally
alone.
rose from the
When lights
dock and
flicked
walked
off one
hand
by
in
one,
hand
and
back
the
to the
city settled into
cabin,
the quiet hum
now
of everything
immersed in
I'd
the
built to keep the
blue
silence
glow
out.
of early evening.
For a while, I
Inside,
let myself believe
Daniel
they'd
built up the
finally be
fire while I
satisfied.
called my sister
That
with
maybe
the
all the
news.
walls I'd raised,
Her
the
excited
spaces
squeals
I'd
so
carved out for
loud
every
that
kid who'd
Daniel
ever
could
felt
hear
like
them
me,
from across
would lay
the
them to
room.
rest.
Later,
But ghosts don't
curled
rest
together
easy,
on the sofa
especially
watching
not
the
the ones you
flames
build from
dance,
your own anger.
I placed a
The threats
protective
faded
hand
after
over
the Arts
my
District
still
opened.
flat
The
abdomen,
city council
marveling
stopped
at the
dragging their
miracle
feet.
happening beneath
Local
my
papers
palm.
that once
One
called me
embryo or
reckless
two,
began
it didn't
calling me
matter.
visionary.
What mattered
That
was that
word
after
sat
years of
strange in my
hoping,
mouth.
we were
Too
finally
big,
on our way to
too
becoming
bright.
the family
I wore
we'd
it like
dreamed
armor
of.
when I walked the streets
Happy
at
on
night,
birthday,
my name glowing
Daniel
above doorways
murmured,
and windows.
placing his hand over mine.
Braden came around more often.
What?
Not to ask for
Well,
anything
your
this
actual
time, but to sit
birthday
with me in the
was
studio
kind of a
cafe, day,
disaster until the
sometimes
end,
in silence,
he explained with a
sometimes
smile.
talking about nothing
So consider
at all.
this your
We
unbirthday
never said
celebration,
the word sorry talks
the day
again.
we found out
It
we're
hung
going to be
between us.
parents.
Understood,
I like
but
that,
unspoken.
I decided,
Mom
nestling
came
closer
too.
to him.
She tried to help.
A new
to
tradition
volunteer
to
at the
mark a new
youth
beginning.
center. She hovered at my
Outside,
elbow,
night had
eyes
fully
wide and
claimed the
fragile.
lake,
I let her
stars
some
reflecting
days.
in its
Others,
dark
I
surface
told
like
her to go
scattered
home.
diamonds.
Dad was gone,
Inside,
buried
wrapped in
under
Daniel's
marble and
arms
wilted
with the fire
flowers.
warming our faces,
I didn't visit.
I felt a
Some
profound
ghosts
sense
were
of
better left
homecoming.
under stone.
Not
Rena
just to this
stayed.
place we loved,
She
but
never
to the future
sugarcoated
we'd
the
been
truth.
working toward all
She
along.
told me I was burning too
The
hot,
journey
that the money would dry up
had been
if I
nothing
didn't
like I'd
rest.
expected.
She told me the threats
There
would
had been
come back if I
detours
didn't
and
keep my guard up.
misunderstandings, moments of
laughed.
despair and
I told
unexpected
her I'd rather
allies.
burn than disappear again.
But sitting here now,
She said,
I
"You're the
wouldn't have
strongest
changed a
person I
single
know, Ro."
step of the path that had
But
led us
even
here.
stone cracks.
Not even the moment on my 35th
One night, I
birthday
stood
when
on the
I'd
roof of
found
the Arts District.
Daniel's wedding
The
ring
wind
on the
snapping
bathroom
at my
sink
hair.
and feared
the
the
city lights
worst.
below blurred through the
Because
rain.
sometimes
I
I now
closed my eyes and
understood
listened to the heartbeat
what
of
seems like
everything
an
I built.
ending is
For a
actually
moment,
just the
it felt
beginning
like
of a
enough.
different, better
Then my
story
phone
than the
buzzed.
one you thought you were
Email.
living.
No subject line.
And our new
no
story
name.
was just
Just a
beginning
single
to
line of
unfold.
text.
Was just beginning to unfold.
Asterisk,
The
every
morning of my
empire
pregnancy
falls.
test dawned crisp and
Asterisk.
clear.
I stared at it.
I woke
until
before
the
the
wind blew
alarm,
screen dark.
my body humming
I
with
should have
nervous
been
energy
afraid.
despite having
I
barely
should have
slept.
called Rena, called the
Beside
police,
me, Daniel
called
stirred,
someone.
immediately
But instead, I
alert as if he'd
laughed.
been hovering
A
just
sharp,
below
cold
consciousness
sound that cut
all
through the
night.
night.
Today's
Let
the
them come.
day,
Let
he
them
murmured,
try.
reaching
The
for my
next few
hand.
months blurred into
Today's the
steel and
day,
paperwork.
I
The
echoed,
Arts District
trying to
grew
keep my
roots,
voice steady.
But it was never just about
We
one
had an
place.
8 a.m.
My
appointment
next
at the
plan
fertility
coiled
clinic
tight
for
in
the
my
blood
head.
test that would
Housing,
determine whether the
shops,
embryo transfer
galleries,
had been
all
successful.
stitched together across
Dr.
the city
Chen
like
had promised
veins.
results by
A
late
network of
afternoon,
spaces. They
which
could never scrape my
meant
name off.
hours of
Brain
waiting,
worried.
wondering,
He told
and
me I
trying
was
not to
pushing too
obsess
hard,
over every
that the
potential
family
symptom.
needed me. That Mom woke up at night
The drive to
crying
the
my
clinic
name.
passed in
I told
comfortable
him she should have
silence,
remembered it years
both
ago.
of us lost in
He
our
didn't
own
fight
thoughts
me.
and fears.
Maybe he finally understood
Over
that I
the
was fighting
past 2
ghosts
years
he
of
couldn't
treatments
see.
we'd been through,
One night, I
this
came home to
exact
find my flat
scenario
door
twice
ajar.
before.
The lock busted.
Both
My
times had
stomach
ended in
dropped through the floor.
disappointment.
Inside,
Both times we'd
everything was
regrouped,
overturned.
adjusted the
My sketches
approach,
torn.
and tried again.
My photos smashed.
But
My
this time
laptop
felt
gone.
different.
On the wall,
Maybe it was the
scrawled in
increased
black spray
hormone
paint.
levels Dr. Chen had been
Asterisk,
so encouraged
some
by.
ghosts can still kill.
Maybe it was the higher
Asterisk,
quality of the embryos.
I stood there,
Or
breathing
maybe it
hard
was
until
simply
my lungs burned.
that the journey to this
Then I
moment
called
had been
Rena.
so
She answered
unexpected,
on the first ring.
from birthday crisis
Ro,
to renewed
they were here.
commitment to potential twins,
Stay there. I'm
that
coming.
it seemed fated to
I
succeed.
didn't wait. I grabbed a
The
can
blood
of white
draw
paint
itself
from the
took
storage
less than a
closet and
minute.
covered the words on
As
my
the
wall
nurse
before
labeled
the
my
police
sample,
arrived.
she
If they
smiled
wanted a war,
encouragingly.
they'd have to write new threats.
Try to keep busy today.
I wouldn't give them the
Staring at your
satisfaction of seeing
phone
me
waiting for
flinch.
results won't make
When
them
the
come any
police left,
faster.
Rena sat with me
Easier
in the
said than
wreckage.
done.
She poured whiskey into
Breakfast?
chipped mugs.
Daniel suggested
drank
as
in
we left the
silence.
clinic.
You know you
That
could stop,
diner
right? She said.
you like is just around
you
the
could
corner.
Cash out. Live on
Normally,
a
the
beach.
thought of their
Let the
blueberry
city fight its own
pancakes would have been
ghosts.
tempting.
I
but
looked
my
around at
stomach
the
was in
ruined
knots.
sketches, the shredded
Actually,
blueprints,
I
the
think I
empty
want to go to
space
the
that had
lake
once been my
house.
refuge.
Daniel raised an
And
eyebrow.
do what? Sit on a
Really?
beach while they erase me again?
That's a 2-hour
She touched
drive.
my hand.
I know, but
They'll never erase
it feels
you now.
right.
You've won.
That's where everything changed on my
hadn't.
birthday,
Not yet.
where we found out about the
Winning
fertility
wasn't the
treatment
same as
working.
surviving. And
It
surviving
seems fitting
wasn't
to
the
be
same
there
as
when we
being
get the
remembered.
results.
I
He
slept on the
smiled,
couch that night, the
understanding
smell of
without
paint
needing
thick in
further
my nose.
explanation.
In the dark,
The
I
lake
whispered
house
to the
it
old
is.
ghosts, "Come back."
We stopped at
I'm
home to
still
pack
here.
overnight bags,
They did.
both of us moving with
The final
purpose,
blow didn't
grateful
come
for
from
something
bricks or
concrete to
firebombs.
do.
It came
As
from the
Daniel
people who
loaded the
once
car,
cheered
my phone
name.
rang.
A lawsuit.
Olivia.
A coalition
How are you holding
of
up?
neighbors and former
She asked
partners
without
claiming
preamble.
I'd overstepped.
Nervous,
That my new
hopeful,
expansion
terrified,
plans violated
I
zoning
admitted.
laws.
We just
That
did
my
the blood
developments
test.
were pushing out the
And
very
now,
people I
the
promised
longest
to
wait
help.
of your life
Rena
begins.
slammed the papers on my desk.
She knew the
her
process
eyes wild.
well after supporting
This
me
is
through
bullshit,
previous
Ro.
attempts.
You know that, right?
Actually, we're heading to the
know,
lake
I
house to
said.
wait for the results.
Doesn't mean it won't stick.
It seemed
The hearings dragged on
symbolic
for months.
somehow.
Reporters circled like
That's
vultures.
perfect. Olivia
Some days,
agreed.
I caught my reflection
Full
in the
circle
courtroom
moment.
windows. My
She
hair pulled
paused.
back, my suit
Want
sharp,
company?
my eyes hollow.
I could
Mom
drive
came
up
once.
later.
She
Be
sat in
there
the
when
back,
you get the
wringing
call.
her hands, her lips moving
I considered
silently,
her offer,
praying for
touched
me,
by
maybe.
her willingness
Or
to
for
drop
herself.
everything to support us.
Braden testified.
Thanks.
He said I'd always
but
been
I think
stubborn,
Daniel and I need
always
this
been a
time
fighter.
together.
He called
Whatever
me the
the
strongest
results,
person he knew.
we should process
I didn't look at him
them
while he
privately
spoke.
first.
I couldn't.
I
In
understand
the end,
completely.
The judge ruled
but
in my
I'm just a
favor.
phone call away
the
if you
expansion
need
could
me.
move ahead.
I
But
know.
the victory tasted
and
like
live.
ashes in my mouth.
Thank you
That
for
night,
everything.
I stood
Not
in the
just
middle of the new
today,
site.
but
An
throughout
empty
this
lot
whole
ringed
journey.
with the bones of old warehouses.
That's That's what best friends
the
are
city
for,
hummed around me,
she
alive
said
with
simply.
the dreams I'd planted in its
As we
dirt.
drove north toward the
Rena
lake,
called.
I felt my
You did it.
anxiety
Again.
gradually easing.
I know, I said.
There was something almost
my voice sounded
meditative about
small.
watching the
Come home,
cityscape give
Ro.
way to
Sleep.
suburbs
Just
and then to
one night.
countryside,
I
as
laughed.
if we were physically
Ghosts
distancing
don't
ourselves
sleep.
from the stress of waiting.
When I finally did go
What are you
home,
thinking
the
about?
wind rattled the windows
Daniel asked,
all night.
glancing over at me.
Somewhere.
How
I
much
swear I
has
heard my
changed since
father's
we were
voice.
last here?
Asterisk?
It's only
You'll
been a
break
few
yourself in
weeks, but it
two.
feels like longer.
Asterisk?
He nodded.
Maybe I would.
Your
but I'd break
birthday
like a
seems
hammer
like a
hitting
lifetime
stone.
ago.
The next morning,
A
I pinned my
lifetime
final
ago, I
blueprint to
thought.
the wall.
You were
edges
leaving
taped
me,
down
I
like a
mused.
flag on new soil.
Now we might be
It
having
was
twins.
bigger than anything I'd
Let's
ever
not
built.
get ahead of ourselves,
Riskier.
he cautioned gently,
Maybe even impossible.
though I could hear
But
the
when they asked
undercurrent
about
of
it,
excitement
years
in his
from now,
voice.
when they whispered my name at
We
family
arrived at the
dinners
lake
and in
house
city
shortly
council
after
meetings,
noon.
and around
Unlike
crackling
my
fires
previous
in the
frantic
dead of winter,
visit on my
they'd
birthday,
say,
this
"She
time I
never
noticed
stopped.
the
She built
subtle
until the ground
signs of
broke under
early
her
autumn,
feet." And then she
gold-tinged
built
leaves
again.
on the maple trees,
I looked at the
the
ghosts
slightly
one last
cooler
time,
breeze off the
smiled,
water,
and got to work.
monarch
The
butterflies
last
pausing
blueprint
on their
pinned to my
migration
wall was
south.
more than a plan.
Inside,
It was my
the cabin
confession,
welcomed us with
my
familiar
manifesto,
comfort.
my promise
Daniel
that no
built a
matter
small
how deep
fire
they
while
buried
I
me,
prepared
I'd
lunch,
claw my name into
both
the
of us
concrete
finding
so they'd
solace
trip
in
over it for
routine
generations.
tasks.
It was insane.
We ate on the deck,
Too
watching the
ambitious.
lake sparkle
A
in the
community
afternoon
hub 3
sun,
times the size
deliberately
of anything I'd ever
avoiding
built.
conversation about what
Affordable
the test
housing
results
stacked
might
above artist
reveal.
studios, shops
Remember
run
when
by
we
local
bought this
families,
place?
a rooftop
Daniel asked,
greenhouse dripping
gazing out
herbs
over
onto
the water.
balconies. A place
3
that could
years
outlive
ago
the
this
ghosts
month,
and the gossip.
I nodded.
A place that could outlive
Everyone
me.
thought we were
Rena
crazy
didn't
spending
even
that
bother to
much
tell
on a
me I was
second
out of my
property.
mind. She just showed
Best
up with
decision we
takeout
ever
and
made.
4 packs of highlighters.
We spent the afternoon
If we're gonna do this,
walking the lake
she
shore,
said,
skipping
doing it with our
stones
eyes
across
open.
the calm water,
we worked
and
until dawn most
steadfastly not
nights,
checking our
my
phones
flat
every
smelling
5
of old
minutes.
coffee and stress sweat.
By 4 o'clock,
Sometimes
however,
Braden called,
the pretense
but
of
I didn't pick
distraction
up.
had grown thin.
Sometimes
Distraction
Mom
had grown
texted,
thin.
but I didn't answer. They'd come knocking soon enough, when the headlines started to spin, when the old money in town realized I wasn't done yet. They came for me like I knew they would. First, the same whispers. She's overreaching. She's pushing too far. She'll ruin the city if she keeps building. Then the protests. Polite at first, then venomous. Rose selling us out. Rose in it for herself. The same kids who painted their dreams on my murals now shouting that I'd stolen theirs. Rena wanted to hit back with press releases, interviews, carefully crafted statements about community trust. I wanted to walk into the town square and scream, "Where the hell were you when I was standing in the rain building this city from the bones up?" But ghosts don't scream. They haunt. And I was nothing if not a ghost. So I did what I always did. I put my head down, I worked. I signed contracts with local carpenters, cut deals with immigrant-run shops, promised community shares to the single mothers who'd once knocked on my office door, asking for work. I buried my name in the soil alongside theirs. It wasn't enough. A letter showed up at my office one night, slipped under the door like all the others. Except this one didn't threaten fire or blood. This one said, "Your legacy is poison. You built it on a lie. Ghosts can't hold a city forever. Asterisk." I read until the paper tore between my fingers. Rena found me like that. Knees on the floor, shredded confetti of my worst fear drifting around me. "Ro, look at me," she said, her voice like sandpaper. "They're wrong. You didn't build on a lie. You built because they lied to you. You're the only thing real in this city." But the seed was planted. The next council meeting was a circus. Protesters with signs, neighbors with petitions, investors with cold feet. Even Braden showed up this time, standing at the back like a ghost of himself. When they handed me the microphone, I almost laughed. "Here she is," asterisk, they wanted to say. "The monster, the thief, the queen of concrete and rebar." So I told them the truth. I told them about the girl no one invited. The girl who stood in the rain and promised she'd make her name too heavy to forget. I told them about the buildings they loved until they hated them. About the rooms they filled with their children while they whispered that I'd never belong. I told them that if they tore it all down tomorrow, I'd build again, and again, and again, until the ghosts finally lay down beside me, satisfied that I'd never go quiet. Some people clapped, most just stared. Braden met my eyes across the room, and I swear I saw a flicker of something like pride. Or grief. Or both. Afterwards, he found me alone in the hall. "You can stop, you know," he said. "You can walk away. You've done enough." I touched his cheek, like Mum used to do for him when he was small. "For you, maybe. Not for me." He laughed, but it cracked at the edges. "You're going to kill yourself, Annie." Better than letting them do it for me. When he left, he didn't look back. I watched him go, the golden boy who'd once been my everything, now just another ghost I'd outgrown. The final approval took 3 months. 3 months of rumors, sabotage, threats, and cold nights staring at my ceiling whispering, "Don't let me stop now." Not yet. And then, one morning, the permit landed on my desk like a heartbeat on paper. Rena burst into tears. I just stood there, shaking, staring at the seal at the bottom. Proof that I'd won. Again. Still. We broke ground that spring. The old rail lines ripped up, the foundations poured. The city's bones cracking open for me one more time. Brayden came to the site once. He stood at the fence, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Why this?" he asked. "Why one more?" I looked at him, and the answer was simple. Because I'm still here. When Mum died, I didn't go to the funeral. I stood on the roof of my half-finished fortress, wind slamming into my face, the city humming under my feet. I felt her ghost join the others. Dad, the girl I'd been, the family that never saw me. I whispered to them all, "I forgive you. I forgive you for making me real." They never threatened me again. Not because they stopped hating me, but because they knew it wouldn't matter. The city was mine now. My name carved into brick and steel, whispered in the corners of classrooms and studios and storefronts. When the final building opened, they asked me to speak. I did, but I didn't talk about my family, or the parties they didn't invite me to, or the ashes of old grudges. I talked about the kids who would stand here when I was gone, the kids who'd see my name and know that once a ghost built a city out of the cracks no one else wanted to touch. And when the ribbon fell, I didn't feel the ghosts anymore. I felt the city breathe. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.